today we are starting with a new section. Modern India हमें शुरू करना है. And when we are talking about modern Indian history, what are the important periods and themes that we will be covering? So first we have to start with the earliest phase, that is the period from the 16th to the 18th century. Okay? Within this, we are going to talk about the advent of Europeans and the main theme is going to be the factors responsible for their arrival in India. Who were the first Europeans to arrive in India during the modern period? 16th, 15th, end of 15th century, Portuguese. So the Portuguese in India, their activities and policies, that is going to be the next sub-theme. Then, because of the rising importance of the Indian Ocean trade, the Indian Ocean became a theater for global conflict between three important powers during the 17th century. So this is the 17th century tripartite struggle. So one was the Portuguese, other powers, the British and the Dutch. Okay? So we are going to look at this struggle and its outcome. By the end, the largest remaining power in India, the British East India Company, right? So a brief history of the East India Company. That means its formation, its early history in India, its important factories, the structure, governance structure of the company, etc. That we are going to cover, right? And then we are going to take a glimpse into 18th century India. Now, 18th century India is considered to be a transformative age in India. In the beginning, the Mughals had a huge empire. By the end, the British had started to establish a huge empire. In the beginning, India was firmly in the grasp of medievalism. By the end, the modern age had started. Okay? So, we are going to take a look at several developments over here. First is the decline of the Mughal Empire. As the Mughal Empire declined, a number of regional kingdoms emerged during the 18th century. And in the second half of the 18th century, the phase of British Empire building also started in India. So, the start of British ascendancy, right, through the Carnatic Wars and the Anglo-Bengal Wars, right? So this is what we have to cover in the first phase of modern India. Clear hai? Sure. Having done this, then we are going to take a brief look in the history of Governor Generals from 1773 to 1858, from Warren Hastings to Lord Canning. Okay? Warren Hastings followed by Cornwallis, followed by John Shore, then Wellesley, then George Barlow, then Minto, Hardinge, Amherst, Bentinck, Auckland, Ellenborough. Then we have Hardinge नहीं था, Hastings. Then we have Hardinge, and finally Dalhousie and Canning. So when we are studying the history of governor generals, what do we have to take a look at? The important wars and battles. So the process of British imperialism is going to continue. We are going to look at the Anglo-Mysore Wars, the Anglo-Maratha Wars, and the Anglo-Sikh Wars. However, warfare was not the only medium of British Empire building in India at this point of time. A number of policies were also visible, such as the policy of subsidiary alliance and the doctrine of lapse. Right? So these are the important political developments. Right? Then within the history of governor generals, we are going to look at the administrative changes, the economic policy, and the social policy of these company administrators. Clear hai? Acha. Administrative changes such as the introduction of new legal machinery, new acts, new legislation, new land revenue settlements. Economic policy in response to the changing economic priorities of the British Empire, the British economy, the colonial economy was also changed. Social policy, the increasing policy of westernization, the spread of modern education, social reform, legislations, etc. ये सारी चीजें हम कवर करेंगे इसमें. Having done this, we are going to look at the third phase, the Indian response. Initial Indian response to the establishment of British rule, violent or peaceful? Violent, right? Manifesting itself in a number of revolts and rebellions. The anti-colonial rebellions by tribals, peasants, then other rebellions which can be categorized as politico-religious uprisings, and finally rebellions by those people who were in an elite position earlier before the establishment of British rule, but now they have been dispossessed of their powers. So rebellions of the dispossessed elites. The most recognizable manifestation of violence against the British in the middle of the 19th century, which revolt? The Great Revolt of 1857. यहाँ पे हमें क्या क्या बात करनी है? The factors which were responsible for these revolts, and these factors can be divided into the administrative, economic, social, cultural, racial policy of the company. Then we have the outcome, and finally the impact of the Great Revolt. Okay? Now, having covered the Great Revolt, we are going to look at the early beginning of Indian nationalism. Now, early beginning of Indian nationalism was a far cry from the political development of nationalist aspirations. India, in the middle of the 19th century, was nowhere close to being a nation. वो nationalist sentiment present नहीं था. Why? Because the society was divided, fragmented. There were a number of prevailing social evils. So first, a cultural and social foundation to nationalism had to be given, and that was given by the 19th century socio-religious reform movements. Here we have to take a look at the issues which were plaguing the Indian society, the ideas which were responsible for reform, the individuals who were at the forefront of this process, and their institutions. And finally, we have to take a look at the impact that they had on the Indian society, Indian polity, and Indian history as a whole. 4 eyes में हम इनको cover करेंगे. Important social reformers that we have to talk about: Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Jyotiba Phule, and Swami Vivekanand, the Arya Samaj and the Deoband movement, Wahhabi movement. तो इनके बारे में सबसे ज़्यादा बात करेंगे. Right. Now, having done this, कौन सा number है? 6th, 5th. Having done this, we are going to take a look at the rise of Indian nationalism. First, we are going to define nationalism in the context of India, how it was different from Western nationalism, and then we are going to take a look at the factors that were responsible for the rise of Indian nationalism. How did it manifest itself in the form of the Indian national movement and the living embodiment of the Indian national movement? The first All India political party kaun sa? The Indian National Congress. Now, there's a debate with regards to the establishment of the Congress, right? Whether it was a safety valve to protect the British Empire or not. So, that debate we have to cover. Then, we have to look at the evolution of the Indian national movement. So, history of Indian nationalism can be divided into several phases. The earliest phase, kaun sa? The moderate phase, followed by the extremist phase. When both of them failed, then once again the violence is going to become visible. This is going to be known as revolutionary extremism. After the experiment of revolutionary extremism, a new personality emerged as the, you can say, the frontier leader of this movement. Kaun? Mahatma Gandhi introduced a new political strategy and a new political vision to the Gandhian phase. And from the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s, we also start to see the emergence of socialist thinking within the national movement. So the socialist phase, right? यहाँ पे हमको क्या क्या चीजों के बारे में बात करनी है? First of all, the objectives, the methods that were used, the achievements, and their failures. ठीक है? So these are the things that we have to keep an eye on. And finally, we are going to look at the progression of India towards freedom and partition. Right. Now, this is the period from 1940 to 47. Important political developments. The August offer, the individual satyagrah, the Cripps proposal, and its failure leading to the Quit India movement, the Wavell Plan, the Indian National Army movement, followed by the INA trials and the Royal Indian Naval Mutiny. So we are in 1946, early 1946 by this point of time. These developments created a huge pressure on the British in India, right? How did they respond? By sending a new mission to India to negotiate for the transfer of power, that is the Cabinet Mission Plan. Cabinet Mission Plan created the peace, hope for peace, hope for Indian unity, but later it broke down, resulting in the Mountbatten Plan and the ultimate independence and partition of India. Now, this is a very bird's eye view. हमने डिटेल में सारे के सारे डेवलपमेंट्स नहीं डिस्कस किए हैं, सारे नेम नहीं किए हैं. जैसे जैसे हम आगे बढ़ते जाएंगे, we'll be introducing those new developments. ठीक है? Booklet has not been uploaded. It is uploaded earlier. Okay. तो booklet वगैरह सबके पास है ना? ठीक है. Now, coming to the first theme, क्या है? The advent of Europeans, the early history of modern India, 16th to 18th century, right? Now, some basic questions have to be answered. Who were these people? From or when did they arrive in India? From where did they arrive, or where did they first arrive, and where did they establish their first factory? So, the correct order of arrival of European powers to India क्या है? Portuguese, Dutch, British, Danes and French. ठीक है, याद रहेगा. बताओ क्या है करेक्ट ऑर्डर? Portuguese, Dutch, British, Danes and French. अच्छा. The Portuguese were not only the first to arrive, but the last to leave India also. When was Goa liberated? 1961 में. ठीक है. So they were both the first to arrive and the last to leave India. Who was the first Portuguese sailor to arrive in India? Vasco da Gama. Where did he arrive? At Calicut. कहाँ पे है? कोस्ट में आया होगा, उड़ के तो हाँ नहीं रहा था ना. This is in Kerala. ठीक है. And where did the Portuguese establish their first factory? At Cochin in 1503. Similarly, Dutch, British, Danes and French, their first port of arrival is going to be Surat. ठीक है. However, their first factories are all going to be different. The first Dutch factory at Masulipatam, first British factory at Masulipatam, first Dane factory at Tranquebar, this is Trinichpoli, Tamil Nadu में, and first French factory at Surat. ठीक है. So this is one area that you may have to focus on. कर लोगे? अच्छा. बताओ. The first British factory in India established within the Mughal Empire or outside the Mughal Empire? गलत हो गया. Not within the Mughal Empire. Where is Masulipatam? Not Gujarat. Andhra Pradesh. Machilipatnam. Right? कब establish हुआ है? In 1611. At this point of time, the coast of Andhra Pradesh was under the governance of which Deccani Sultanate? Golconda. ठीक है. तो इस तरह से भी आपको कोरिलेट करना पड़ेगा. अनदर एग्जाम्पल, on which coast of India was the first British factory established? Konkan coast, Malabar coast, Coromandel coast or the northern Sarkars? Coromandel coast. ठीक है, तो ज्योग्राफी का भी ध्यान होना चाहिए आपको along with history. तो Coromandel coast is the coast of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. जो northern Sarkars, that is the coast of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. Northern Odisha, Odisha and northern Andhra Pradesh. ठीक है, Malabar coast between Karnataka and Kerala. ठीक है, that is south of Goa. Then north of Goa, the Konkan coast up to the Tapti river. Then गुजरात का गुजरात coast है, बंगाल का बंगाल coast है. ठीक है, so इस तरह से भी आपको आइडिया होना चाहिए. हाँ, नॉर्दर्न सरकार्स फ्रॉम क्या बोलते हैं, द कोस्ट ऑफ नॉर्दर्न आंध्र प्रदेश एंड ओडिशा. ठीक है, दैट इज द नॉर्दर्न सरकार्स. Now, why were the Europeans so interested in coming to India at this point of time? आप लोगों ने अपनी NCERTs में पढ़ा होगा that the Europeans started coming to India for the 3 Gs. नेपोलियन का क्या है? नहीं, नेपोलियन is a figure who is going to become dominant in the early years of the 19th century. ये हम बात कर रहे हैं towards the end of the 15th, beginning of the 16th century. ठीक है, तो 3 Gs क्या है ये? गोल्ड, ग्लोरी एंड गॉड. गोल्ड का मोटिवेशन तो बड़ा ऑब्वियस है, क्या? पैसा कमाने के लिए आ रहे थे थ्रू दी ट्रेड. ग्लोरी, झंडा ऊंचा रहे हमारा, फॉर पर्सनल ग्लोरी, फॉर नेशनल ग्लोरी दे वर कमिंग. एंड गॉड टू स्प्रेड क्रिश्चियनिटी. ठीक है, लेकिन दिस इज अ वेरी सिंपलिस्टिक वे ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग इट. The arrival of Europeans to the Indian subcontinent during this period was the outcome of a number of socio-economic and political factors. अब क्या socio-economic and political factors की बात कर रहे हैं हम? Let us see. First is the Renaissance. Renaissance क्या है? It is a French word which means rebirth or reawakening. No. Enlightenment was a later phenomena that was going to have a greater impact on the lives of the common people, right? Renaissance is confined to the realm of philosophy, art and religion. Enlightenment is going to have a more concrete effect upon the polity and the economy also. ठीक है, so Renaissance should be understood as a new intellectual awakening in Europe which started from the middle of the 14th century, lasted up to the 16th century. ठीक है, अब इसकी वजह से हुआ क्या? The Europeans were in the process of relearning much of the knowledge that they had forgotten during the Dark Ages, right? And this resulted in large-scale technological development. So, a scientific revolution took place. Now, this new scientific knowledge was applied to agriculture. तो क्या होगा? An agricultural revolution is going to take place, right? Now, once the agriculture starts to improve, what is going to happen to the general level of prosperity? Income start to increase. What is going to happen to the food availability? That is also going to increase. what is going to happen to the supply of meat, and what is going to happen to the population? That is also going to increase. तो अब क्या हो रहा है? There is a new market that is emerging in Europe, which has more and more disposable income. And what kind of goods are they going to want to consume? Better quality goods. And what was the production hub of the entire world at this point of time? It was the East, Asia, India and China. So the demand for oriental goods is going to increase. Further, because the supply of meat has increased, तो मीट को प्रिजर्व करने के लिए उस समय रेफ्रिजरेटर्स होते थे? नो. व्हाट वाज यूज्ड? स्पाइसेस वर यूज्ड. एंड वेयर वर द स्पाइसेस कमिंग फ्रॉम? फ्रॉम द ईस्ट, राइट? So demand for spices is also going to increase. Now, on the one hand, demand is increasing. On the other hand, the Europeans are getting new and better methods of direct communication, more reliable communication with India due to improvements in the navigation and shipping industry. ठीक है? So magnetic compass, the astrolabe, better maps are going to become available. The Europeans are going to discover the use of winds for sailing on the open seas. Deep water navies, deep water shipping industries are going to emerge. Therefore, long distance voyages are going to become possible. Larger ships are going to be made which can carry a large number of not only sailors but also goods which are needed for these longer voyages. ठीक है? So not only do they have the desire, but they also have the means of establishing direct contact with the East. ठीक है? अच्छा. The Renaissance stood for an intellectual awakening. Right? Now, the Dark Ages had been characterized by the ideological domination of the Catholic Church. The Church was in charge of shaping the views of the society on various social matters. The scientific thinking was also informed by the thinking, the dogmas of the Church, etc. Now, all of those started to be challenged, right? For example, Church क्या बता रहा था लोगों को कि दुनिया गोल है या फ्लैट है? The world is flat. So if you travel very far from your home, what is going to happen? You're going to fall off the edge of the earth, right? Now, these kinds of thinking started to be challenged. They started to be questioned. The idea of a spherical earth, of a heliocentric universe, etc. Better knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, all of this was emerging. So this intellectual awakening now engendered a new spirit of adventure, and this came to characterize the European consciousness of the 16th century, of the 15th century, Renaissance period. Okay? Now people were not only more willing to challenge the old sources of authority, but they were also looking to explore and understand the world for themselves. चर्च क्या बोल रहा था? Man by birth is a sinner. ठीक है? And therefore, what does man have to do? He has to perform penance. And how can he perform penance? By giving money to the church and remaining obedient to the feudal lords. So during the Dark Ages, the church had become a pawn in the hands of the feudal lords. So there was a priest feudalism nexus. ये हमने इंडिया में भी देखा था, right? Medieval ages में, during the post Gupta period, the same process was happening over there as well, right? And अब क्या thinking हो गया? That man by nature, man by birth is good. He is not a sinner. And if he is good, does he have to perform this penance? No. Does he have to remain obedient to the church and the feudal lords? No. So, अब क्या करेगा? You don't have to worry about the afterlife. God is not going to punish you for working hard and enjoying your life. If you want heaven, it is up to you to make a heaven on earth. ठीक है? So, the importance of enterprise was being emphasized upon. ठीक है? What is going to happen to feudalism? Is it going to get strengthened or weakened because of Renaissance? It is going to get weakened. And if feudalism gets weakened, so who is going to become stronger? The monarch is going to become politically stronger, right? And the rise of stable monarchies is further going to promote the spirit of adventure. Why? Because the new idea of mercantilism is going to start dominating the Renaissance period economic thinking. Basic idea of mercantilism क्या है? That the wealth of the world is finite, it is limited. The wealth of nations is defined by the size of their treasury. It is measured in the amount of bullion, precious metals that they have, right? तो mercantilism के साथ कौन सा कॉन्सेप्ट इमर्ज होगा? ड्रेन ऑफ वेल्थ का, right? Now, if the entire economy of the globe is a divisible pie and France and England are competing with each other, अगर फ्रांस को पिज्जा के 8 पीस मिल गए, who is going to be the biggest loser? England, right? So now, with mercantilism, the idea of economic protectionism is also going to emerge. That is, the kings have to look after the economic interests of their merchant class. And protectionism का logical conclusion क्या होता है? The establishment of monopolies, right? Now, if you want to establish a monopoly, you'll have to have an early start. If a power discovers India, then chances are that they will be able to monopolize the trade of India for the longest period, right? So, stable monarchs are also going to encourage overseas voyages and explorations. They are going to encourage overseas traders as well. ठीक है? समझ में आ रहा है ना? That it is part of a complex socio-economic process. ठीक है? Now, these were the push factors. अब pull factors क्या है? The fall of Constantinople in 1453. What is Constantinople? It is the old name for the present city of इस्तांबुल. कहाँ पे है इस्तांबुल? यूरोप में या एशिया में? दोनों में है. आधा यूरोप में, आधा एशिया में. It is the capital of present day Turkey. It sits astride which water body? The Bosphorus Strait, right? Now, Bosphorus Strait कहाँ पे है? It is a narrow strait connecting the Black Sea with the Mediterranean. So all the land routes coming from China and Asia were going to pass through Constantinople. Earlier, Constantinople was under the rule of a Christian power known as the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire or Byzantium. ठीक है? However, in 1453, Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire fell to an Islamic power, a new emerging empire. कौन सा? The ऑटोमन एम्पायर। एंड जैसे ही ऑटोमन्स ने इस्तांबुल के ऊपर कब्जा किया, व्हाट इज द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट दे आर गोइंग टू डू? They are going to blockade all these trade routes. They are going to charge exorbitant amount of taxes. Therefore, Europe came under increasing economic pressure. ठीक है? So what did they now want to do? They wanted to discover an alternative sea route towards India that could bypass the Ottoman power completely. ठीक है? And where is this alternate sea route going to come from? Around the Cape of Good Hope. ठीक है? अच्छा. Now, what kind of a power was the Ottoman Empire? Christian or Islamic? Islamic. So it also created a religious pressure. किस तरह का religious pressure? Now, the Christian and Islamic worlds had fought 4 extremely disastrous crusades during the Dark Ages, right? From the very beginning, the relationships between the Christian kingdoms and the Muslim powers had been extremely hostile. The Byzantine Empire was supposed to act as a great wall, which was, you can say, prohibiting Islam from making any inroads into Europe. Now that wall had been brought down. तो अब क्रिश्चियन वर्ल्ड में, क्रिश्चियन किंगडम्स में किस तरह का एटमॉस्फेयर होगा? इज एवरीथिंग गोइंग टू रिमेन चिल और इज इट गोइंग टू बी एक्सट्रीम पैनिक? पैनिक होगा. दिस इज गोइंग टू बी सीन as a cataclysmic event, as a major catastrophe for the Christian world. At any point of time, the Ottoman Empire may come knocking on their doors. One Christian kingdom after the other may topple. So what are the Christian kingdoms going to do? They will say that Europe may disappear, Christianity may disappear from Europe, but we are not going to let that be the death of Christianity. Before that can happen, we are going to spread Christianity to the rest of the world. So अब चर्च भी किसको सपोर्ट करने लग जाएगा? The explorers go and discover new worlds, spread Christianity over there. ठीक है? तो अभी समझ में आ रहा है गोल्ड, ग्लोरी एंड गॉड क्यों बोला जा रहा है? ठीक है? So this religious pressure is also going to play a major role. समझ में आया है? आया या नहीं आया? तो that first question about the factors for the arrival of Europeans we have answered. Now in your notes आपको ये headings मिल जाएंगी. The Renaissance, its effects, its meaning, fall of Constantinople, the associated economic and religious pressure, the rise of stable monarchies. This was a corollary to the Renaissance, right? And all of this led to a period of European history known as the Age of Adventure or the Age of Discovery. So why is it called the Age of Adventure or Age of Discovery? Because a number of explorers navigated the entire globe. The old world was rediscovered and the new world was discovered. When we are saying old world, हम किसकी बात कर रहे हैं? Asia की. We are talking from the perspective of Europe. So Europe and India, Europe and Asia had ancient contacts, right? So that was rediscovered and an entirely new world was discovered. That is the continents of the Americas, Australia and large parts of Africa. ठीक है? Important pioneers in this field कौन-कौन हैं? Who are the important explorers of this period? नहीं, the personalities we are talking about. Bartholomew Diaz. What was his great contribution? Sailing up to the Cape of Good Hope in 1487. Where is the Cape of Good Hope? The southern tip of South Africa. Why was it called the Cape of Good Hope? Because from this point after the discovery, it was expected that India is going to be discovered beyond this if we sail even further into the Indian Ocean. ठीक है? तो इसको बोल दिया Cape of Good Hope. Another famous explorer, Christopher Columbus. In 1492, what was his great discovery? अमेरिका, नॉर्थ अमेरिका और साउथ अमेरिका? नीदर. कहां पे पहुंचा था ये? ब्रायन लारा के घर पहुंचा था. ही रीच दी कैरिबियन आइलैंड्स. The first European to land in America proper, कौन? जिसके नाम पे the Americas have been named? An Italian traveler, Amerigo Vespucci. In 1501, he landed in present-day Brazil. Then, in the context of India, कौन? Vasco da Gama. He rounded the Cape of Good Hope and sailed up to Calicut. Then some other explorers. Ferdinand Magellan. The Magellan Straits have been named after him. 1529. He was the first person in the world to do what? Circumnavigate the entire globe, to make a complete journey around the world. ठीक है? And apart from him, countless others. ठीक है? Somebody is going to discover and rediscover Australia. Somebody is going to explore the western coast of Africa. Someone the eastern coast of Africa, etc. कोई पहुंचेगा नॉर्थ पोल, अभी तक वो वहीं पे है. Somebody is going to reach the south pole. कोई ब्रायन लारा के घर, कोई रिकी पॉन्टिंग के घर जा रहा है, right? So this is going to take place. This is going to be a characteristic feature of the age of adventure. Factors you are aware of. Why did the age of adventure emerge? Why did it begin? Because of a number of complex socio-political and economic factors, economic changes. ठीक है? अच्छा. Next we have to look at the Portuguese in India, their arrival and early activities. First Portuguese to arrive, Vasco da Gama. From where did he come? From Portugal, but he was a person of Spanish origin. ठीक है? So he started his expedition from Portugal under the patronage of King Emmanuel in 1497. So his journey started in 1497. He reached India in 1498. Where did he reach? Calicut, by sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. And after arriving in Calicut, he first visited whom? The local ruler. क्या बोलते थे उसको? Zamorin, right? And he asked for permission to trade in which commodity? Spices. Which spice was he most interested in? Black pepper. In the ancient period, black pepper was known as? Black pepper ही बोलेंगे. Black gold. तो ठीक है, ब्लैक गोल्ड बोलते थे, लेकिन एंशिएंट पीरियड में संस्कृत लिटरेचर में उसको क्या टर्म यूज करते हैं? यवन प्रिय यूज करते थे. ठीक है? अच्छा. नाउ ही वाज गिवन दिस परमिशन एंड ही रिटर्न्ड टू पोर्चुगल विद 3 ships full of pepper, earning a huge profit. कितना प्रॉफिट? 6000% का. ठीक है? दैट इज जितना इंडिया में खरीदा था उसका 60 गुना दाम में यूरोप में बेचा. सो दिस क्रिएटेड अ ह्यूज सेंसेशन इन यूरोप, राइट? After this, what is going to happen? A number of other Portuguese sailors are also going to be attracted. So in 1500, the second Portuguese sailor, a friend of Vasco da Gama, क्या नाम था? Pedro Alvarez Cabral. He was also welcomed by the Zamorin. लेकिन इंडिया में आने के बाद इसने कुछ बदमाशी करनी शुरू करी. What did he say? That the Muslims are our enemies. Since you are trading with the Muslims, you are also our enemy. If you want to be my friend, what do you have to do? You have to expel all the Muslim traders from your ports. And who were the Muslim traders? Majority of them were Arabs. Okay? So in fact, the western portion of the Indian Ocean, in the North Indian Ocean, कौन सा sea बोलते हैं उसको? The Arabian Sea. क्यों नाम पड़ा है Arabian Sea? Because the Arabs used to dominate this entire region, the navigation in this region from the ancient period right up to the medieval period. Okay? And this brought him into conflict with the Arabs. Is he going to return with something or empty-handed? Empty-handed. इसको लात मार के यहाँ से भगा दिया गया. ठीक है? In 1503, Vasco da Gama returned. ये कैसे आएगा? पूरी ऐंठ में आएगा या हाथ जोड़ के आएगा? हाथ जोड़ के आएगा, सॉरी बोलते हुए, right? And was able to persuade the Zamorin to allow him to establish a factory at which place? Cochin. When? 1503. So the first Portuguese factory in India? Cochin, right? Which served as the early headquarters of the Portuguese, right? Acha. Now, the Portuguese had already invited the hostility of the Arabs, and although the Arabs were still hostile to the Portuguese, there were certain confrontations, but still the Portuguese were able to establish their trading centers at Calicut, Cochin and Cannanore. कहाँ पे हैं ये? On which coast? All on the Malabar coast. ठीक है? And after having done this, what did they try to do? They tried to expel the Arabs. So Arab traders को harass करने लग गए, उनके ships को लूट लेते थे, कभी sink कर देते थे. They would enslave the crew. They would start taking money from them, looting them, etc. ठीक है? Now the Zamorin was fed up with the Portuguese, and what did he do? He attacked them at Cochin. But what was the outcome? The Portuguese had a superior navy and the Zamorin was defeated. And with this, the Portuguese supremacy over the Malabar coast, especially in Kerala, was established. Clear hai? Now, another aspect of the Portuguese rule in India was the establishment of the Estado da India. What do you understand by this phrase? It's a Portuguese phrase. क्या मतलब होता है Estado da India? It means the Portuguese state of India. It was not the Portuguese East India Trading Company. ठीक है? तो from the very beginning, what was the priority of the Portuguese? Polity or trade? No, it was primarily political control. ठीक है? And that is why they were never able to deepen their trade in India, in the Indian Ocean. Now, the important objectives were to create a Portuguese monopoly by displacing whom? The Arabs. The Portuguese monopoly on India's internal trade or external trade? India's external trade. Secondly, they wanted to launch a holy war against whom? Against Islam. Third, they wanted to create a Portuguese Christian empire in the East. So spreading Christianity was another priority for them. And lastly, the function of the Estado da India was to govern all the Portuguese settlements in the East. ठीक है? अच्छा. Now, the Estado da India was functioning as an extension of the Portuguese kingdom, right? So it was acting as a Portuguese department, and department का हमेशा head होगा. And who was the head of the Estado da India? A series of governor generals, right? So important Portuguese governors, 3 names are mentioned here. Francisco de Almeida, Alfonso de Albuquerque and Nino da Cunha. क्या क्या important policies and visions इन्होंने introduce किए, those become important. First is Francisco de Almeida. Right? He was the first Portuguese governor in India and he introduced a new policy known as the blue water policy. What do you understand by a blue water navy? यूज करते हैं ना टर्म इंडिया के नेवल डॉक्ट्रिन में दैट द अल्टीमेट ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ द इंडियन नेवी इज टू बिकम अ ब्लू वाटर नेवी. क्या मतलब होता है? Where are you going to find the blue waters in the oceans? Near the coast or in the open seas? In the open seas. So a navy which has the ability to project its power far beyond its own shore, that is known as a blue water navy. So blue water policy क्या होगा? They have to establish a complete monopoly, a chokehold on all the important sea lanes of communication. ठीक है? तो इनकी इजाजत के बिना ना कोई इंडियन ओशन में आ सके, nor can anybody leave. ठीक है? And how to do that? Establish your control over all the important choke points, over all the important ports in the Indian Ocean. Now, if you are looking at the Indian Ocean, तो कहां से लोग आ जा सकते हैं? ठीक है, बहुत ज्यादा एक्यूरेट नहीं है बट काम चल जाएगा. दिस इज मैडागास्कर, दिस इज द केप ऑफ गुड होप. केन्या में ज़ांज़ीबार, छोटा सा आइलैंड. मोजाम्बिक, ऑफ द कोस्ट ऑफ येमेन अ स्मॉल आइलैंड, एडन. देन at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, which important port? Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, right? Then important ports in Western India, Goa, Cannanore, Cochin, Colombo, the Straits of Malacca, etc. तो इनके ऊपर किसका कंट्रोल होना चाहिए? पोर्चुगीज का कंट्रोल होना चाहिए. So if any power comes to the Indian Ocean, they would first have to pass through the Portuguese checkpoints. The Portuguese can stop them. If anybody wants to leave, the Portuguese can stop them. This is the idea. Clear है? अच्छा. Policy introduce किसने किया है? Francisco de Almeida. Right? Now, Francisco de Almeida, how is he going to try and establish his dominance over the Indian Ocean? Peacefully or violently? Violently. तो 3 important battles हैं यहाँ पर. ये आप काट दो, ये वाला पोर्शन गलत लिखा हुआ है. First is the Battle of Chol, 1508. Second is the Battle of Dabul. This is 1508. And third is the Battle of Diu. This is 1509. Battle of Chol was a naval battle that was fought between the Portuguese on one side and the Sultan of Gujarat along with the navy of Calicut on the other. What happened? The Portuguese were defeated. And who is the governor at this point of time? Francisco de Almeida. His son was killed in this battle. ठीक है? अब बदला कब लेगा वो? In the next battle. In the Battle of Dabul, Dabul was a port located in the territory of the Deccani Sultanate known as Bijapur. ठीक है? Dabul और Dabhol महाराष्ट्र में है. अच्छा. Now in this battle, he invaded the port of Dabul and sunk the entire navy of Bijapur and the Sultan of Gujarat that was docked over there. This was a resounding victory. But the problem was not over. Now the powers of Gujarat and Calicut joined their hands with another foreign power. Con? The Mamluk Sultans of Egypt, who were being supported by the Ottoman Empire and the merchants of Venice also. Once again, किसकी जीत हुई? Portuguese की जीत हुई. ठीक है? Portuguese won this as well. And with this, the Portuguese were able to displace the Arabs as the monopolizing power in the Arabian Sea region and the Indian Ocean region. ठीक है? तो ultimate outcome क्या हुआ इसका? The establishment of a Portuguese monopoly on India's overseas trade. Clear है? नाम याद रहेंगे तीन battles के? Chaul, Dabul and Diu. While returning from India to Portugal, Francisco de Almeida was killed off the coast of Africa, probably by some Egyptian mercenaries, but we are unsure. ठीक है? And इसके बाद कौन आएगा? Alfonso de Albuquerque, 1509 to 1515, second governor of the Portuguese in India, and he is considered to be the real founder of the Portuguese power in the East. Right? कैसे? He actually implemented the blue water policy. Blue water policy introduce किसने किया था? Almeida. Implement किसने किया? Realize किसने किया? Albuquerque ने. ठीक है? By conquering important choke points in the Indian Ocean such as Hormuz, Aden, Zanzibar, Malacca, etc. ठीक है? तो ज्योग्राफी आप लोगों का हो गया है अच्छे से? नहीं हुआ है? तो let me just point this out. कहाँ कहाँ पे है ये? ये कौन सा आइलैंड है? ये तो पता होगा ना? Madagascar. A small island of the coast of Kenya known as Zanzibar. Then a prominent post in Kenya, Mombasa. Then a small island just off the coast of Yemen. This is the island of Aden. Whichever power controls Aden can control entry into the Red Sea. Then this is the Strait of Hormuz. Then we have Goa. Then Colombo. And ये कौन से straits हैं between the Malay Peninsula and Java? Malacca. So it was Albuquerque who established control over all these important ports. We have already mentioned his conquest of Goa. कब हुआ था? 1510. Before this, Goa was ruled by which dynasty? The Adil Shahi dynasty of Bijapur. And who had helped Albuquerque in taking Goa from Bijapur? Which famous Vijayanagar ruler? Krishnadev Raya. ठीक है? Thus giving Krishnadev Raya a monopoly on all the horses that were coming from Arabia and Central Asia. ठीक है? So in 1510, Albuquerque conquered Goa by defeating the Adil Shahis of Bijapur, and he also entered into an agreement with Krishnadev Raya of Vijayanagar for the regular supply of horses. Booklet is in PPT form of 154 pages. Can you please provide that to us in a consolidated form? Why was Venice supporting Egypt? Now, Egypt was a client of the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire and the merchants of Venice were trading partners. In fact, the Venetian merchants were the go-between between the Ottoman Empire and the rest of Europe when it came to trade. So that is why the economic interests of Venice were aligned with the economic interests of the Ottomans, which were aligned with the political interests of Egypt, of Gujarat, and of Calicut. All of them wanted to remove the Portuguese influence, right? That is why. can you please explain about religious pressure? So I'm thinking religious pressure fall of Constantinople के बाद, right? तो fall of Constantinople के बाद क्या हुआ? That suddenly the gates of Europe had been laid open to an Islamic invasion, right? तो यहाँ पे एक बहुत ज़्यादा डर बैठ गया लोगों के मन में that at any point of time the Islamic invaders can come and ransack us as well. So therefore, in an effort to preserve Christianity, the church started promoting overseas explorations with the objective of spreading Christianity to the newly discovered regions, right? So that is the reason. Now, as far as the booklet is concerned, I can provide you the Word document or PDF form, but only after the class, right? Or once we take the break, I can send it. Okay. Huh.
Why were they, why was Egypt a time? Because they must be Christian.
Yeah, तो सब ये सुना है, सबसे बड़ा पैसा होता है, राइट? तो पैसे के सामने धर्म कर्म सब कुछ डाइल्यूट हो जाता है. नाउ दिस इज द अफ्रीकन लैंडमास एंड यहाँ से क्या आ रहा है? यूरोपियन लैंडमास. दिस इज द ब्लैक सी. ये वो हो गया, क्या बोलते हैं, टर्की वगैरह वाला रीजन हो गया. इनफैक्ट ऐसा नहीं. Now, Venice is located right here. This entire region had come under the control of the Ottoman Empire. लेकिन the Islamic traders who were coming from the Ottoman Empire, they were not welcome in the European countries. इनको ostracize किया जाता था. Therefore, they needed some middlemen. And who were the middlemen who were willing to make alliances? The merchants of Venice. But they insisted upon one thing. क्या? That we can be the only go-betweens. We can be the only middlemen. ठीक है? So, for all the trade routes that were connecting China and India through both the land as well as the sea route, कहाँ से जाना पड़ेगा? Through Ottoman territory, along with a healthy dependence upon the merchant community of Venice as well. ठीक है? So their economic interests were aligned with the Ottomans, plus clients of the Ottomans, subordinates of the Ottomans were the Mamluk sultans of Egypt as well, right? So their economic interests are also aligned with the Venetians. Venetians do not want to lose their monopoly on the Indian trade. Who is trying to establish its monopoly on the Indian trade? Portuguese. So Venetian merchants and Portuguese merchants क्या होंगे? एक दूसरे के enemies. And Portuguese are also the enemies of the Ottomans, the Egyptians and the other Arabs and the Indian powers. So all of them are going to make a grand alliance and all of them are going to be beaten. Clear hai? So this is the relationship. Now, the next important Portuguese governor, Nuno da Cunha, right? And important development under him, he shifted the headquarters of the Portuguese Estado da India. पहले कहाँ पे था? Cochin. He shifted it to Goa, right? Now, other important details about the Portuguese history of India. One of their policies was known as the Cartas system. अब ये Cartas है क्या? These are pieces of paper, documents. These act as a pass or a permit. Without having this permit, no ship was allowed to fly on the Indian Ocean, was allowed to transport goods on the Indian Ocean. ठीक है? The word cartas has been derived from the Arabic word kirat, which means paper or document. It was a system of passes and permits. So essentially, what were the Portuguese doing? They were least interested in the actual trade between India and Europe. They were more than happy to collect a tax from the other traders who were involved in this trade. So they would tell the Arab merchants, Indian merchants, okay, you want to trade, I will give you the permission, but बदले में क्या देना पड़ेगा आपको? पैसा देना पड़ेगा, राइट? तो जैसे हफ्ता वसूली वाला सिस्टम होता है ना, वैसे ही ये कर रहे थे. तो तब से अपने आप आपको क्या बोल रहे हैं? डॉन, right? So Don Almeida, Don Albuquerque, right? So that is why मुंबई के डॉन में और पोर्चुगीज डॉन में बहुत ज्यादा फर्क नहीं है. These people were acting as the self-appointed constables of the Indian Ocean. What were they telling them? That you have to pay us this money because we are going to offer you protection. And who were they supposed to buy protection from? These were the people who would attack the people as well, attack the other sailors as well. So ships without the cartas were captured, their cargo confiscated and their crew enslaved. तो खुद को बचाने के लिए अगर पैसा देना पड़े, so is that protection money or not? Protection money है ये. Clear? Carta system समझ में आया? अच्छा. So thus, rather than focusing upon trade expansion, the Portuguese were indulging in rent seeking, acting as self-appointed constables of the Indian Ocean. Then apart from this, the Portuguese had also started to engage in piracy. Piracy मतलब समझ में आता है ना? क्या? कॉपी कर लेना नहीं, हो तो डिजिटल पायरेसी होता है. सी में जो पायरेट्स होते हैं, those who are acting outside the law in order to attack merchant vessels with the purpose of monetary benefit, right? तो वेसल्स को लूट लेंगे या फिर कोई इंपॉर्टेंट पर्सनालिटी उसको पकड़ लेंगे, रैंसम मांगेंगे. कैप्टन फिलिप्स देखा है, राइट? तो उसमें देखते हैं ना, सोमालियन पायरेट्स, मॉडर्न पायरेसी अभी तक चल रहा है, राइट? The Portuguese used their naval superiority to raid traders and Muslim pilgrims performing Hajj. Right? What was their biggest base of operation in India? Hooghly. ठीक है? So they used Hooghly as a base for piracy in the Bay of Bengal. कहाँ है Hooghly? West Bengal में. ठीक है? Ultimately, they were driven out in 1632 during the reign of which Mughal emperor? Shah Jahan, by his Mughal provincial governor Qasim Khan. बताया था ना? अच्छा. Now you remember the objectives behind the Estado da India? क्या था? होली वॉर करेंगे, क्रिश्चियनिटी स्प्रेड करेंगे. Do you think they are going to have a liberal religious policy or not? No. So an extremely bigoted and conservative religious policy was followed in order to spread Christianity. The Portuguese adopted a bigoted religious policy to promote Christianity, engaging in the following practices. क्या practices कर रहे थे ये? First of all, mixed marriages. Between whom? Indian men and Portuguese women, or Portuguese men and Indian women? Portuguese men and Indian women. So they wanted to create a larger social base for their power in India. One of the ways of doing that, increase the Portuguese population, increase the Christian population. They were bringing a large number of sailors and traders from Portugal. These people were encouraged to settle in India, purchase their own land and have their own families. Were they bringing women from Portugal? No. तो कहाँ किससे शादी करेंगे? Indian women से. ठीक है? Do you think the local population is going to like this? नहीं. Further, Albuquerque witnessed one very bad practice happening. क्या? सती. इसने इसको कर दिया ban. Do you think that the major objective was to bring social reform? No. क्यों ban किया होगा? शादी करवाने के लिए. These widows, instead of killing themselves, they should marry the Portuguese men. ठीक है? So this was one strategy to spread Christianity. Second strategy, inducement. क्या मतलब? Those people who converted to Christianity were rewarded by the Portuguese. कैसे reward किया जाएगा? Certain additional privileges are going to be given. Tax rates lower होंगे. They are going to be provided government employment, trading opportunities. They are going to be allowed to ride on horses. बाकी सब पैदल चलें. Right? They are the ones who can own the large houses. Only they are going to be able to own agricultural land. बाकी सब उनके यहाँ पे मजदूरी कर रहे हैं. So these kinds of inducements are also going to be given. Then the Portuguese did not stop just here. They also utilized the tool of forcible conversions as well. So they used their political and military power to convert people forcibly. They forbade all other forms of worship in their territories and destroyed mosques and temples as well. Okay? Did the Portuguese also bring some Christian missionaries? Yes. तो किस तरह के Christian missionaries? We have already mentioned. Jesuit Christian monks were sent from Portugal to India to establish their own missions in India. During the period of Akbar, कौन? Montserrat and Aquaviva, है ना? याद है नाम? इबादत खाना डिस्कशन में भी पार्टिसिपेट किया था. Then the most famous Portuguese Jesuit saint of this period कौन? गोवा में बहुत बड़ा सा बसिलिका भी है इनका. He is interred there, embalmed and buried there. नहीं गए हो गोवा? गए तो होगे लेकिन यहाँ नहीं गए होगे, राइट? हाँ, that was Saint Francis Xavier. कहाँ से? From Portugal. He belonged to the Jesuit order. Where is he buried? At Goa. कहाँ पे मरे? Not in Goa. UPSC ये क्वेश्चन पूछ चुका है. I think it was year before last या last year पूछा था. Last year था? पक्का? अच्छा. तो he from India was traveling to Southeast Asia and then beyond. China जा रहे थे to spread Christianity, hopping from one island to the other, trying to convert or convince as many people as possible. It is there that he died. He was brought back and then buried at Goa. ठीक है? So he is buried at Goa. But did not die there. Right? So these were the religious policies. Do you think that the Portuguese are going to gain a number of supporters in India? No. Neither are they going to form any major political affiliations, nor are they going to have a large social base. Neither is their trade going to be very developed. So once new European powers come, are they going to be able to defend their empire? नहीं कर पाएंगे, right? And they are going to simply be swept aside. And this is going to take place in an episode known as the 17th century triangular conflict or tripartite conflict. So three parties are competing against each other. कौन? Portuguese, Dutch and the British. What is the main prize? क्या है? The monopoly of the Indian Ocean trade. ठीक है? Now, the Eastern Portuguese Empire was a Thessalocracy. Thessalocracy क्या होता है? A sea-based empire or a sea-based power. ठीक है? Did Portuguese have extensive inland territories in India? नहीं. So neither in India nor in the rest of the world did they have large territories inland. Did they ever have a large army, land army? No. they focused only and only upon their sea power. ठीक है? That held sway over the Indian Ocean by controlling the important choke points. However, 17th century में क्या हुआ? More advanced and more powerful naval power started to arrive. The Dutch and the British and the Portuguese are going to be swept aside. Now, in the 17th century tripartite or triangular conflict, these are the important events. 1596 पोर्चुगीज को साउथ ईस्ट एशिया से किसने बाहर निकाला? The British. Now, British established their early dominance in Southeast Asia toward the end of the 16th century. But then Dutch came. Dutch were always very interested in the spice trade, and majority of spices were coming from Southeast Asia. So in 1623, the British were forced out of Southeast Asia by the Dutch in an episode known as the Amboyna massacre. ठीक है? Now, only 20 people were killed and only 10 of them were actually British, but इसको अंग्रेजों ने massacre बोल दिया है, and they said that because of this, they now shifted their focus to the trade of India. They withdrew from Southeast Asia. 1632, what happened to the Portuguese at Hooghly? They were driven out of Hooghly. By whom? By Qasim Khan. Who was he? Mughal governor of Bengal during the reign of Shah Jahan. Right. In 1662, an alliance emerged between the Portuguese and the British. कैसे? Through a matrimonial alliance. किसकी किसकी शादी हो रही थी? The English prince Charles II and the Portuguese princess Catherine of Braganza. Right. And दहेज में क्या मिला? The city of Bombay. दहेज कहाँ से कहाँ जाता है? लड़की वालों से लड़के वालों को. So it was earlier Portuguese, you can say, territory. Now it was given to the British. And at the same time, the very next year, all the Portuguese settlements in the Malabar coast are going to be captured by the Dutch. So Portuguese have been considerably weakened by this point of time. They have no means of defending themselves. So who are they going to run to for shelter? Their new allies, con? The British. In 1667, the territory of Bombay was leased to the English East India Company. कितने annual rent पर? 10 pounds per annum. ठीक है? 10 pound में पूरा का पूरा बॉम्बे दे दिया. But it was not a huge city like you see today. It was an uninhabited group of islands. Simultaneously, the East India Company was also put in charge of managing all the Portuguese settlements in India as well. ठीक है? So in 1667, Portuguese power in India has formally come to an end. They are going to hold on to some regions such as Goa, Daman, Diu, etc. But they are no longer going to play a major political role in India. Okay? Now, during the 1670s, 1680s, there was large-scale hostility between the Dutch and the British. However, both of them realized that this is having negative impact on their trade. So they decided that the Indian Ocean is big enough for both of us. Let us divide it. The Dutch were more interested in what? In the spices of Southeast Asia. तो अंग्रेजों ने क्या कहा? लो और खुश रहो. But leave us India because we are more interested in India's cotton market. ठीक है? So there was an agreement between the Dutch and the British, who were more interested in Indonesia. Dutch who were more interested in Indonesia, and the British who were more interested in India, to stay out of each other's territories. Okay? So by the end of the 17th century, Portuguese तो eliminate हो चुके हैं. The British are left behind, and the Dutch influence has been withdrawn to Southeast Asia. But this is not the end of Dutch involvement in Indian politics. In 1759, the last conflict between the Dutch and British in India is going to take place. That is the Battle of Bedara or Chinsura. Is this before or after the Battle of Plassey? 1759 में it is after the Battle of Plassey. So Bedara is the name of a location in West Bengal, just 20 miles north of Hooghly. ठीक है? Now अब ये बताओ, if the British East India Company has complete control over Bengal, तो कौन जीतेगा इस बैटल में, the Dutch or the British? The British are going to win. ठीक है? And what was that development, or who had invited the Dutch to come and attack the British? कौन invite करेगा इनको? The Nawab of Bengal. Who is the new Nawab of Bengal after the Battle of Plassey? Mir Jafar. Siraj-ud-Dawla को मरवा करके Mir Jafar had become the new Nawab, but he had discovered that he was a puppet in the hands of the company. Therefore, he wanted freedom from the East India Company. इसको क्या लगा कि डच को बुला करके इनको eliminate करवा सकते हैं. That is why he had done it. ठीक है? So this was the last engagement. What was the outcome? British victory. ठीक है? So this is the 17th century triangular conflict. Now, the Portuguese were the first to arrive and the last to leave India, 1498 to 1961. So they are bound to have left some kind of impact on the culture, right? So क्या क्या impact हुआ? The introduction of Christianity on a major scale. ठीक है? Saint Francis Xavier led an evangelical mission to India. New kind of architecture was also introduced. What are the new kinds of buildings that are going to be built? Churches, convents, etc. कहाँ पर बनेंगे सबसे ज़्यादा? At Goa. The churches and convents of Goa have now been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. What was the style of architecture that was introduced? This is known as Baroque architecture. Right? However, Baroque architecture, which had been imported from Portugal and Spain to India, now merged with the local architecture also. And this gave birth to the emergence of Indo-European architecture. So, if there is a question that in the churches and convents of Goa, the European element is represented by Gothic architecture, Neo-Roman architecture, Baroque architecture, Visigothic architecture. The correct answer is going to be Baroque architecture. Okay? Then the development of a unique culture in Goa, the Goan culture, due to cultural exchanges between the local population and the Portuguese implants, right? Gave birth to distinct Goan culture with unique attire, unique fashion, unique cuisine, unique customs, festivals and folklore, etc. In the field of agriculture also, the Portuguese made major contributions. The Portuguese had another empire on the other side of the world. कहाँ पर? Brazil में. So they were bringing a number of new commodities from Brazil to India, right? So the Portuguese introduced new varieties of several crops, such as mango. क्या नाम दिया mango का? Alfonso. papaya, pineapple, guava, chili peppers, kidney beans, potato, tomato, groundnuts, cashew nuts, tobacco, maize, etc. ये सब कौन लेके आए थे? द पोर्चुगीज. तो बिफोर दिस इंडिया के खाने में आलू होता था? नहीं होता था. डिड इंडियन स्मोक टबैको? नो. तो ये सब पोर्चुगीज ने किया है. देन द पोर्चुगीज आल्सो इंट्रोड्यूस द प्रिंटिंग प्रेस टू इंडिया. And what kind of literature do you think they are going to be most interested in publishing? Religious literature, that is the Bible. अब हिंदुस्तानियों को बाइबल लैटिन में पढ़ाया जाएगा, पोर्चुगीज में या स्पेनिश में? वर्नाक्युलर्स में. तो कॉपीज ऑफ द बाइबल वर रीप्रिंटेड इन मलयालम एंड कन्नड़ा. Now the Portuguese also introduced an entirely new feature in the Indian Ocean trade. That is the beginning of armed trade. Before this, brisk trade was happening on the Indian Ocean, but that was not backed by the naval power. ये concept किसने introduce किया सबसे पहले? Portuguese ने. And the future pattern of trade is going to be armed trade or unarmed trade? Armed trade. So all the future trading companies from Europe are going to bring with a naval contingent, come with a naval contingent as well. ठीक है? तो merchant shipping से क्या बन गए ये लोग? Merchant navy बन गए. And this is going to emerge as a new means of establishing not only their monopolies but also to establish their empire. ठीक है? In the process of empire building also, Portuguese were the pioneers. Why? They had not arrived in the Indian Ocean as simple traders. क्या करने के लिए आए थे? They had come to establish a Portuguese Estado de India, the state of India, with the Portuguese Christian Empire, right? So they were the first to have the vision of creating an overseas empire among the European powers who arrived in India. Clear? So ये हो गए Portuguese in India. Next, what do we have to see? A brief history of the English East India Company. Established where? London. When? 31st of December 1600. It was established through a charter provided by the British monarch कौन? Elizabeth the First. And in this charter, the privileges and rights of the company were also enumerated. The most significant of these powers? A complete monopoly on the entire trade in the vast region stretching from the west of the Straits of Magellan to the east of the Cape of Good Hope. तो Cape of Good Hope कहां पर है? Southern tip of South America. And Straits of Magellan, sorry, Cape of Good Hope, southern tip of South Africa. And Straits of Magellan, southern tip of South America. ठीक है? तो साउथ अमेरिका से के वेस्ट में एंड केप ऑफ गुड होप के ईस्ट में. दैट मीन्स द एंटायर वर्ल्ड ओशन एक्सेप्ट फॉर द अटलांटिक ओशन. हु इज द ओनली इंग्लिश ट्रेडर दैट कैन ट्रेड? द ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी कैन ट्रेड. ठीक है? अच्छा, ये अंग्रेजों की महारानी इतनी मेहरबान क्यों थी कंपनी के ऊपर? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, दैट idea of establishing a monopoly, है ना? And second of all, she was also a large shareholder. She held 10% ownership of the entire company's stock value. ठीक? Now, initially, the charter was granted for a period of 15 years. ठीक है? From 1600 to 1616. But later it was given to the company permanently. The permanent monopoly was granted under which British monarch? जेम्स द फर्स्ट. नहीं, एलिजाबेथ के अंदर केवल 15 साल के लिए दिया गया है. एलिजाबेथ इज गोइंग टू बी रिप्लेस्ड बाय जेम्स द फर्स्ट. ही इज गोइंग टू गिव द परमानेंट मोनोपोली टू द कंपनी. क्लियर है? अच्छा, नाउ द फर्स्ट कंपनी रिप्रेजेंटेटिव टू अराइव इन इंडिया कौन? Captain William Hawkins. When did he arrive? 1608. कहां पे पहुंचा था? At Surat. And from Surat he traveled to Agra to meet Jahangir. ठीक है. एंड जहांगीर से इसने क्या परमिशन मांगा? लेट मी एस्टैब्लिश अ इंग्लिश ट्रेडिंग फैक्ट्री एट सूरत. ठीक है. डिड जहांगीर गिव दिस परमिशन और नॉट? नहीं. सो ही वॉज अनसक्सेसफुल. क्यों? बिकॉज एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम Portuguese influence was the strongest among all the European powers in the Mughal court. And Portuguese जो ambassadors हैं, traders हैं, they are going to convince Jahangir not to give them this permission. Clear है? Jahangir क्या करेगा? He is going to listen to the Portuguese. Why? क्योंकि वैसे ही बेगैरत लोग हैं, अगर नहीं माना तो हो सकता है कि हाजियों के ऊपर अटैक कर दें, पायरेसी दोबारा से शुरू कर दें. सो द ब्रिटिश हैड नॉट येट प्रूवन देयर नेवल सुपीरियरिटी ओवर द पोर्चुगीज. देयरफॉर जहांगीर chose to wait and watch. Next major development, 1611. The company established its first factory at Masulipatam. This was in the territory of Golconda. Golconda was ruled by which dynasty? Qutub Shahi dynasty. Within the Mughal Empire or outside the Mughal Empire? Outside the Mughal Empire, with the permission of the Qutub Shahi Sultan. ठीक है. So first factory of the British in India is Masulipatam, present day Andhra Pradesh. Next we have the important battle which is going to change the fortunes of the company. कौन सा? Battle of Swali or Suwali. This was a naval battle between the Portuguese and the English East India Company. The company was being led by Captain Best. ठीक है. And हुआ क्या यहाँ पर? The Portuguese navy was utterly destroyed. The British had proven their naval superiority. तो जो अभी तक परमिशन रुका हुआ था, that is now going to be granted. And impressed by this victory, Jahangir allowed them to establish their factory at Surat. So next factory, second factory कहाँ पे establish हुआ? At Surat in 1613. ठीक है. Now another British representative is going to visit the court of Jahangir. This time the English ambassador in 1615. बंदे का नाम क्या था? Thomas Roe. He was the ambassador of which British monarch? James the First to the court of Jahangir. And he was able to obtain the permission to establish British factories throughout the length and breadth of the Mughal Empire. ठीक है. तो जो अभी तक एक सूरत में फैक्ट्री थी in the Mughal Empire, now across the Mughal Empire they were permitted. And by the first quarter of the 17th century, the British had factories at Masulipatam, Surat, Bharuch, Ahmedabad and Agra. ठीक है. By 1625, Masulipatam, Surat, Bharuch, Ahmedabad and Agra. Now, I think last year there was another question that where had the British not established a factory by the first quarter of the 17th century? So, options were Masulipatam, अहमदाबाद, सूरत और श्रीकाकुलम। क्या करेक्ट आंसर होगा? श्रीकाकुलम, दैट इज श्रीकाकुलम। यहां पे इस समय तक नहीं बना था। क्लियर? नाउ in 1622 the company gave another blow to the Portuguese. क्या कैप्चर कर लिया? Hormuz. This gave them access to which water body? The Persian Gulf. Right. And in 1632 the company obtained from the Sultan of Golconda a document known as the Golden Farman. फरमान क्या होता है? It is a royal order. ठीक है? And through this Golden Farman, the company was allowed to set up its factories throughout the territory of Golconda. ठीक है? Golden Farman क्यों बोला गया इसको? नहीं, because इसके बदले में the company had given the Sultan a gift of 500 pagodas. So in the context of medieval India, what is the significance of the word pagoda? It is a currency. In which part of India? North India or South India? South India में. Other currencies क्या क्या हैं? In South India, Panam. ठीक है? तो Panam was another currency. And पिछले साल ये सवाल भी पूछ लिया यूपीएससी ने, राइट? ऐसे क्वेश्चन को छोड़ देना चाहिए। क्यों छोड़ देना चाहिए? अगर नहीं आता है तो फिर यू शुड नॉट टेक अ ब्लाइंड गेस। तो देखो, इफ देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन जहां पर आप कंप्लीटली अनश्योर है और तुक्का बढ़ाने का मन कर रहा है, विदाइन मोड में गए हो सर पे कफन बांध करके, राइट? तो व्हाट इज योर प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ सक्सेस? 1 in 4. ठीक है? नाउ लेट अस अज्यूम यू अटेम्प्ट 4 सच क्वेश्चंस। ठीक? अब इसमें से स्टैटिस्टिकली देखा जाए तो 1 सही होगा और 3 गलत होंगे। नेट कितना होगा? बिग फैट अंडा। ठीक है? तो 1 सही 3 गलत, 1/3 नेगेटिव मार्किंग है, तो 0 आएगा निकल करके। लेकिन किस्मत यूजुअली का साथ नहीं देती है, राइट? सो प्रोबेबिलिटी ये है दैट आप 8 ऐसे क्वेश्चन अटेम्प्ट करोगे और उसमें से मुश्किल से 1 सही होगा, तो चांसेस आर कि नेगेटिव आपका ज्यादा पड़ेगा। बट इफ यू आर अनश्योर अबाउट 1 out of 2 ऑप्शंस, तो 2 आपने एलिमिनेट कर लिए हैं सक्सेसफुली, यहां पे आप अनश्योर हैं, तो बताओ अटेम्प्ट करना चाहिए या नहीं करना चाहिए? यहां पे कर लेना चाहिए। ठीक है? अगर मान लो अच्छा दिन है आपका तो यू कैन डू वेरी वेल। 4 क्वेश्चंस ऐसे अटेम्प्ट किए, 3 सही हो गए, 1 गलत हो गया, तो नेट बेनिफिट इज क्वाइट हाई, क्वाइट सिग्निफिकेंट। अगर मान लो एवरेज डे है, अब भाई हो सकता है आप बिस्तर के गलत साइड पे उठ गए हो या फिर गलत आदमी की शक्ल देख ली है, तो 2 सही 2 गलत। ठीक है? एवरेज डे है, स्टैटिस्टिकली आपके 2 सही होंगे 2 गलत होंगे, तो वंस अगेन आप नेट पॉजिटिव में ही चल रहे हो। एंड अगर बहुत खराब दिन है, 4 ऐसे अटेम्प्ट किए, इसमें से 1 तो सही हो ही जाएगा ना, एंड बाकी 3 गलत, तो भी यहाँ पे नेट कितना होगा? 0 होगा। तो यहाँ पे नेगेटिव आपको कम से कम नहीं झेलना पड़ेगा। सो अब चारों गलत हो जाएगा तो फिर भाई किस्मत अपनी अपनी, क्या कर सकते हो, हाथ पे लिखवा के लाए हो, यहाँ पे लिखवा के लाए हो, ठीक है। बट सी प्रोबेबिलिटी यहाँ पे ग्रेटर है बिकॉज यू हैव ऑलरेडी एलिमिनेटेड 2। अगर 4 में से ब्लाइंड आप शॉट ले रहे होते तो मे बी आपके गलत होने के चांसेस ज्यादा होते, बट बिकॉज यू हैव एलिमिनेटेड 2 तो यहाँ पे सही होने के चांसेस ज्यादा हैं, राइट। तो अगर खराब दिन भी चल रहा है तो भी आपका यहाँ पर 0 ही बनता है। So if you can do this, reach this stage, so my suggestion to you is definitely attempt. नहीं करना चाहते हो, if you don't want to take the risk, if you are sure कि आपका बाकी में परफॉर्मेंस इतना अच्छा है that you will be able to sail through, तो no need to take unnecessary risk. लेकिन अगर आपको ऐसा लग रहा है कि आप बॉर्डर पे हो तो definitely do attempt all such questions. Unnecessary risk मत लो, but you should be a little bit smart about it. Clear है? Does that answer your question? ठीक है, तो ये डेवलपमेंट्स देख लिए। ओके, देन वी कम टू दी कंपनीज, फैक्ट्रीज। तो मॉडर्न लैंग्वेज में फैक्ट्री का मतलब क्या होता है? अ प्लेस वेयर गुड्स आर मैन्युफैक्चर्ड, बट दिस इज नॉट द मीनिंग ऑफ द यूरोपियन फैक्ट्री इन दी 16 to 18 सेंचुरीज। क्या मतलब है? These are godowns cum showrooms, a place where goods are stored and traded. ठीक है? हाँ, नहीं, कारखानास तो आप मुगल्स के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बात कर रहे हो। These are places where goods are produced. कारखानास नहीं है। कारखानास are the state workshops. वर्कशॉप में क्या होता है? प्रोडक्शन होता है। In the British factories, in the European factories, no actual production was taking place. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे कारीगर आकर के मशीनरी यूज करके का सामान नहीं बना रहा है। Things that have already been produced by the other Indian producers, they are purchased from them, they are kept over here. Internally also they are traded, externally also they are traded. तो storage and trade का पर्पज है यहाँ पर, ठीक है। However, as you can imagine, these factories must be quite valuable, also quite vulnerable to the company's competitors. डकैत भी होते थे उस समय बड़े, तो these are going to be protected settlements. They are going to be fortified, guarded, right? And fortifications बनाने के लिए कोई भी ऐसे बना सकता है? परमिशन चाहिए होगा, परमिशन चाहिए होगा। परमिशन कौन दे सकता है? Local ruler, right? So to establish such factories, permission had to be obtained from the local rulers as well. Now, most European factories, where do you think you'll find them? Inland areas में या coastal areas में? Coastal areas में, right? Or maybe some important trade routes if it is inland, both land routes as well as river routes. ठीक है, तो आपको कहाँ पे देखने के लिए मिलेगा? Inland areas में, in पटना, आगरा, कानपुर etc. क्यों? क्योंकि यहाँ पे लंबी बड़ी बड़ी रिवर्स हैं which are easily navigable. ठीक है, अच्छा, सो ये समझ में आया है फैक्ट्रीज होते क्या थे। Now let us look at some of the important factories that the British established in India. First factory to be established, Masulipatam. When? 1611. Please tell the meaning of Jesuit. Jesuit is simply the name of a Christian of an order of Christian missionaries. तो आपने सुना होगा आयरिश ब्रदर्स होते हैं, फ्रांसिस ब्रदर्स होते हैं, ऐसे ही जेजुइट ब्रदर्स भी होते हैं। These are the Jesuit monks. So simply an order of Christian missionaries. So it was the first British factory in India. ठीक है, second British factory in India, Surat. When? 1611, 1612, 1613. What is the significance? Surat was the most important Mughal port on the western coast. It was also the early headquarters of the East India Company in western India. Later, where was the headquarters shifted to? Bombay. Okay. Then, third, we have Balasore. Where is it, Balasore? Odisha, right? When? 1633. Significance, it is the first British factory in Eastern India. Clear? कौन से कोस्ट पर है? मालाबार कोस्ट पर, कोरोमंडल कोस्ट पर, नॉर्दर्न सरकार्स पर, किस पर है? नॉर्दर्न सरकार्स. So the entire coastline north of the Krishna river, north of Guntur, उसको northern सरकार बोल देते हैं up to Odisha. ठीक है. Next we have Madras, established in 1639. A fort is present over here known as Fort St. George. So इसके पहले कोई fortified settlement बनाया गया है? नहीं. So this was the first fort established by the British in India, Fort St. George. It served as the headquarters of the Madras Presidency. Founder was Sir Francis Day. And how had the land been obtained for making this factory? It has been purchased from a representative of the Vijayanagar Empire. बंदे का नाम है धर्मला वेंकटाधरी नायका. He was the local representative of the Vijayanagar ruler, and he granted the company a 3-mile long strip of land on the coast. Which factory? Madras. Which port? St. George. Right. Then we have Hooghly, established in 1651. It was the first British factory in which region? Bengal में. Then we have Bombay, established in 1668. यहाँ पे कौन सा fort? The Bombay Castle. It later served as the headquarters of the Bombay Presidency. And finally we have Calcutta, established in 1698. Which fort? Fort St. William, right? It served as the headquarters of the Calcutta or the Bengal Presidency. And how had the land been obtained? The company had purchased the zamindari rights of 3 villages. कौन से? Gobindpur, Sutanati and Kalikata, right? And on this land, on the land of these 3 villages, ये Fort St. William बनाया गया, which later became the city of Calcutta. It also served as the capital of British India till 1911. And in 1911, new capital of British India, New Delhi. ठीक है. कब हुआ ये? After the Delhi Darbar of 1911. Which British monarch had visited India? कौन आया था? 3 दिल्ली दरबार्स इंपॉर्टेंट, 1877, 1903, 1911. विक्टोरिया, जॉर्ज द फिफ्थ एंड एडवर्ड द सेवेंथ. एडवर्ड द सेवेंथ आया था यहाँ पे. ठीक है. Now let us understand the structure of the organization of the East India Company. Where was the company headquartered? Was it an Indian company or a British company? British company. Headquarters कहाँ पे होंगे? लंदन में, right? The top executive body of the company कहाँ पे मिलेगी आपको, इंडिया में या लंदन में? लंदन में. This was known as the Court of Directors. Initially it had how many directors? 18. Later the number was increased to 24. When was this change made? In 1884. कौन सा नया एक्ट आया था 1884 में? The Pitt's India Act of 1884. ठीक है. अच्छा. Court of Directors were the large shareholders of the company who had been put into the court. अब आजकल इसको बोलते हैं बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स, पहले बोलते थे कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स. बाय द अदर लार्ज शेयर होल्डर्स ऑफ द कंपनी हु हैव वोटिंग राइट्स, राइट? तो शेयर होल्डर्स के भी अलग अलग राइट्स होते हैं ना, तो सम कम विद वोटिंग राइट्स, सम डू नॉट. तो जो बड़े शेयर होल्डर्स होते हैं दे हैव अ डायरेक्ट रोल इन द गवर्नेंस, इन द एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ऑफ द कंपनी. लार्ज शेयर होल्डर्स वर नोन एज द कोर्ट ऑफ प्रोप्राइटर्स. And from among themselves they used to appoint members to the court of directors. अब court of directors and court of proprietors are all of them क्या है ये? They are all shareholders of the company. तो बचपन में वेन थ्योरी पढ़ा था, वेन डायग्राम्स. तो सबसे बड़ा शेयर होल्डर्स, उसका सबसेट कोर्ट ऑफ प्रोप्राइटर्स उसका सबसेट कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स। ठीक है, ये कहां पे है पूरा का पूरा सिस्टम, इंडिया में या ब्रिटेन में? ब्रिटेन में। But the company also has a number of overseas properties, overseas possessions, and their overseas possessions are known as presidencies. तो हर presidency का एक president होना चाहिए, and their president was known as the governor. ठीक है, इंडिया में कितने गवर्नर्स? 3। कहां कहां पे? बीएमसी, बंगाल, मद्रास, और तीसरा बताओ? चेन्नई। अच्छा, मद्रास और चेन्नई अलग अलग कर दिया। बॉम्बे, मद्रास एंड कैलकाटा। ठीक है, तो बॉम्बे, मद्रास एंड कैलकाटा में 3 गवर्नर्स गवर्निंग दी 3 ब्रिटिश प्रेसिडेंसीज। गवर्नर्स वर असिस्टेड बाय अ नंबर ऑफ डेप्यूटी गवर्नर्स। Below the deputy governors, there were a large number of traders. क्या लगता है ट्रेडर्स क्या करते होंगे? ट्रेड करते होंगे। So these people were responsible for making trades, negotiating the deals on behalf of the company with the Indian merchants. ठीक है, they were followed by factors. कौन होंगे ये लोग? They are people who are in charge of the factories of the company. ठीक है, and सबसे नीचे कौन होंगे? The writers. What are they doing? Writing, लिखा पढ़ी का काम कर रहे हैं. They are doing the clerical work. So these were the accountants and clerks of the company. Clear है? अच्छा. Now this kind of arrangement continued till 1773. 1773 में कौन सा एक्ट आया? रेगुलेटिंग एक्ट आया। ठीक है, and the governor of Bengal was designated as the Governor General of Bengal, with supervising authority over the governors of Bombay and Madras. ठीक है, अच्छा। Now tell me, Governor General of Bengal, is he going to be appointed by the British government or not? He is not going to be a government appointee. कौन इनको अपॉइंट करेंगे? The court of directors. All of these are company employees. गवर्नमेंट का कोई रोल है? नहीं है। तो all of these officials are appointed by the company and remain answerable to the company. And ये सिस्टम चलेगा till 1884. कौन सा एक्ट? पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट। 1884 में क्या चेंज होगा? Code of directors is going to remain accountable or remain responsible for their appointment. लेकिन इनके recall, removal में now the government is going to play a direct role. If the government is unhappy with the performance or activities of any company employee, then they can recommend their recall. तो अब क्या हो रहा है? Government control over the company is increasing or declining? It is increasing. धीरे 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 करके इंक्रीज होता जाएगा। ये जो सिलसिला है, it is going to start in 1773 with the regulating act. It is going to end with the 1858 act, an act for the better government of India. क्या होगा 1858 में? हाँ, the company's rule is going to be abolished, crown's rule is going to be introduced. ठीक है, इतनी कहानी समझ में आई है ना? तो ये हो गया structure of the East India Company. Now, when we are looking at the history of British colonialism, we can divide it into 3 phases. ठीक है? So these are known as the 3 phases of British colonialism. And when you say colonialism, क्या समझ में आता है आपको? If you had to define colonialism, how would you define it? कॉलोनी बना देना. देखो, the word colonialism comes from the Latin word colonus. मतलब क्या होता है? सेटलर और farmer. So if we are going with the dictionary definition of colonialism, क्या मतलब होगा? People from one region travel to another region, settle there permanently and start inhabiting it. Start to bring about changes in the local culture because of their foreign heritage. ठीक है? तो इसको बोल दिया गया colonialism. In the context of India, is this what colonialism look like? Did the British ever come to India in large numbers, settle here permanently? No. So in the context of India, the word colonialism refers to the establishment of political control of a foreign power over the native people. ठीक है? Now, is the objective of this political control in itself? Is political control the end in itself? No. Political control is simply the means to facilitate economic exploitation. So the economic relationship between the mother country and the colony becomes the most defining feature. ठीक है? And ये economic relationship कैसा होगा? Is it going to be even or one-sided? One-sided. It is going to lead to the flow of resources from the colony to the mother country. नुकसान हमेशा किसका होगा? कॉलोनी का. फायदा हमेशा किसका होगा? मदर कंट्री का. नुकसान इंडिया का, फायदा अंग्रेजों का. ठीक है? And in order to fulfill this economic objective, the political, administrative, economic, social, and cultural policies of the colonizing power can continue changing as their economic priorities continue to change. ठीक है? तो जैसे जैसे इनकी economic priorities change होती जाएंगी, the means of exploitation, methods of exploitation are also going to change. एंड जो जितनी भी बाकी पॉलिसीज हैं, पॉलिटिकल, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव, इकोनॉमिक, सोशल एंड कल्चरल, दे आर सिंपली गोइंग टू बी इन रिस्पॉन्स टू द चेंजिंग इकोनॉमिक प्रायोरिटीज. इज दिस क्लियर? अच्छा, तो अब ये बताओ, शुड यू अंडरस्टैंड colonialism simply as a set of policies introduced by individual political administrators, colonial administrators? No. Colonialism, especially in the Indian context, should be understood as an entire system, as an entire structure, जिसका basic objective क्या है? Economic exploitation. And if a new colonial administrator, जैसे कि नया गवर्नर जनरल आ रहा है, वो कुछ administrative changes या social policy में changes ला रहा है, so it is always going to be in response to the changing economic priorities. Is this clear? Now, the economic priorities of the British Empire, especially in regards to India, continued to change throughout the entire period of colonial history. तो एक मार्क्सिस्ट हिस्टोरियन है आरपी दत्त, है क्या थे? 1899 में इन्होंने किताब लिखी थी इकोनॉमिक हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडिया. राइट? He has divided British colonialism into 3 phases. कौन कौन से? Mercantile phase, industrial phase, and the financial phase. ठीक है? Now, मर्केंटाइल फेज का टाइम पीरियड 1757 to 1813. What is the nature of the trading relationship between India and Britain? ट्रेड सरप्लस किसके फेवर में है? इंडिया के फेवर में है. The British are purchasing large amounts of spices and finished cotton and silk goods from India. Before 1757, how are they funding this trade? How are they balancing this trade? ये अपनी कंट्री से माल लेकर के आ रहे हैं इंडिया. This is leading to a drain of wealth from Britain to India. Before 1757, they were bringing bullion, that is precious metals, into India. Will they need to do the same thing after 1757 also? क्यों? अब इनके हाथ क्या लग गया? Bengal, right? And they are going to use the revenue collected from Bengal to purchase the Indian goods. Further, they are going to plunder the wealth of Bengal and its people in order to fund their trade. And therefore, now the drain of wealth from India to from India to Britain is going to start in earnest. इतना समझ में आया ना? अच्छा. At this point of time, biggest priority क्या है कंपनी का? What is it? First is to maximize their revenue, है ना? क्योंकि जितना ज्यादा रेवेन्यू होगा उतना बड़ा ट्रेड होगा, जितना ज्यादा ट्रेड होगा उतना बड़ा प्रॉफिट होगा. एंड इनकम को मैक्सिमाइज करने के लिए क्या मिनिमाइज करना पड़ेगा? एक्सपेंडिचर, राइट? So these are the greatest objectives of the company with respect to India. Now, if it is their desire to minimize expenditure, do you think they are going to follow a very aggressive territorial policy? यानी कि लड़ाई झगड़ा करेंगे ज्यादा या अवॉइड करेंगे? As far as possible, they are going to be avoided, so long as any power does not threaten the trade or territory of the company. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि लड़ाइयां होंगी ही नहीं, but not with the design of conquering Indian territory. ठीक है? Even if they establish control over any new region, इनका प्रायोरिटी क्या होगा? डायरेक्ट कंट्रोल मेंटेन करें या इनडायरेक्ट कंट्रोल? इनडायरेक्ट कंट्रोल. व्हाई? बिकॉज डायरेक्ट कंट्रोल मेंटेन करेंगे तो वहां पे एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन प्रोवाइड करना पड़ेगा, खर्चा बढ़ जाएगा. तो इनडायरेक्ट कंट्रोल इज गोइंग टू बी प्रेफर्ड. इज दिस क्लियर? अच्छा. नाउ, डू यू थिंक द ब्रिटिश विल वांट to bring about large scale changes in the Indian society? वेस्टर्नाइज करने की कोशिश करेंगे इंडिया को? नहीं करेंगे. क्यों? ये सब करने के लिए एजुकेशन करना पड़ेगा, राइट? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलप करना पड़ेगा. दैट इज अगेंस्ट देयर इंटरेस्ट्स. ओके. व्हाट इज देयर एटीट्यूड गोइंग टू बी टुवर्ड्स इंडियन पास्ट हेरिटेज एंड कल्चर? पॉजिटिव होगा या नेगेटिव होगा? पॉजिटिव होगा. इट वाज characterized by the philosophy of Orientalism. Orientalism क्या है? The idea that the Eastern culture, the Eastern society is very different from the Western society and civilization, but it is in no way inferior to the Western society and civilization. ठीक है? So there is going to be a healthy respect for the Indian past. A lot of investigation is going to take place in Indian antiquity. For example, कौन सा नया society establish होगा? The Asiatic Society of Bengal, and a large number of Sanskrit works are going to be translated. ठीक है? ये सब क्यों कर रहे हैं? First of all, they want to avoid bringing any social changes, क्योंकि उसमें खर्चा करना पड़ेगा. सेकेंड, द कॉलोनियल एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स बिलीव कि अगर इंडियंस को इफेक्टिवली गवर्न करना है, then you have to learn about the Indians. What are their likes, what are their dislikes, their social taboos, the things that they like to do, what makes them tick, ये सब पता होना चाहिए, तभी अच्छे से गवर्न कर सकते हो. ठीक है? So they are going to follow the policy of Orientalism. क्लियर है? समझ में आ रहा है ना कि इन दिस अर्ली फेज किस तरह का पॉलिसी, किस तरह का माइंडसेट है. अच्छा, देन सेकेंड फेज क्या था? इंडस्ट्रियल कैपिटलिज्म. टाइम पीरियड क्या है? 1813 to 58. Now, by this point of time, the nature of the British economy has been changed drastically. अब क्या हो गया है? Industrialization has accelerated, right? And because of the acceleration of industrialization, जो capitalist lobby है, that is becoming more and more politically influential. तो वो अब ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट, ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट के ऊपर इन्फ्लुएंस एक्सर्ट करना शुरू करेगा, राइट? एंड व्हाट आर देयर टू बिगेस्ट ऑब्जेक्टिव्स? इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट को सक्सीड करने के लिए क्या चाहिए? रॉ मटेरियल to produce goods and large markets to sell the products. ठीक है? Now, if these two are required, तो अंग्रेज अब किस तरह का पॉलिटिकल पॉलिसी फॉलो करेंगे? An aggressive one or a cautious one? No, a very aggressive policy of imperialism is going to be followed, because more and more of the territory of India has to be brought under British control, ताकि यहाँ से maximum amount of raw material extract करके ब्रिटेन भेज दिया जाए, and maximum amount of British factory made goods can be shipped and sold in India. ठीक है? तो a policy of aggressive territorialism is going to be followed. तो अब लड़ाई झगड़ा बढ़ जाएगा या कम हो जाएगा? बढ़ जाएगा. ठीक है? एंड नॉट ओनली वॉर, बट डिप्लोमेसी इज ऑल्सो गोइंग टू बी यूज्ड फॉर ब्रिंगिंग मोर एंड मोर इंडियन टेरिटरी और ब्रिंगिंग मोर एंड मोर ऑफ द सबकॉन्टिनेंट अंडर ब्रिटिश इन्फ्लुएंस. किस तरह की पॉलिसीज लाई जाएंगी? दी subsidiary alliance and the doctrine of lapse. subsidiary alliance किस गवर्नर जनरल का? वेलेस्ली. एंड डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ लैप्स? डलहौजी. ठीक है? तो these people are most well known for them. क्लियर है? अच्छा, do you think that some economic changes are also going to be brought? होगा या नहीं होगा? क्यों होगा? To fulfill these objectives. तो ये मत भूलो कि हमेशा इकोनॉमिक प्रायोरिटीज आर गोइंग टू बी दी टॉप मोस्ट प्रायोरिटी. एवरीथिंग एल्स इज गोइंग टू बी इन रिस्पॉन्स टू दैट. तो अब क्या प्रमोट किया जाएगा? Is Indian manufacturing going to be promoted or discouraged? Discouraged. क्यों? It can compete with the British manufacturing. ठीक है? So this is going to lead to a process known as deindustrialization. Deindustrialization का मतलब the destruction of Indian handicrafts. So the cotton manufacturers, silk goods manufacturers of India, they are going to suffer the most. अच्छा, अब ये बताओ that where were most of the important silk and cotton workshops? In cities or villages? इन द सिटीज। तो अब सिटीज की पॉपुलेशन क्या होगी, कम हो जाएगी, राइट। दिस इज गोइंग टू लीड टू डी अर्बनाइजेशन। Robert Clive, when he first saw the city of Murshidabad, had commented that it is as large and rich as London. अभी बताओ, मुर्शिदाबाद का नाम भी सुना था इसके क्लास के पहले? नहीं सुना था। कहाँ पे है, वेस्ट बंगाल में या बांग्लादेश में? वेस्ट बंगाल में। देख रहे हो किस्मत इतनी खराब हो चुकी है उस शहर की कि आपको भी नहीं पता है कि कहाँ पे है। सो दिस इज गोइंग टू टेक प्लेस। The large production centers are going to lose their value. And is this going to bring about any change in the nature of the Indian economy? पहले क्या होगा? There was a healthy balance between manufacturing and agriculture. Now it is going to become primarily agricultural economy. Right? Is the British industrial interest going to affect the agrarian economy of India in any manner? Yes. किस तरह के गुड्स को बोला जाएगा कि आप प्रोड्यूस करो? कैश क्रॉप्स को. So this is going to lead to the commercialization of agriculture. Yes. इंडिगो, शुगर केन, ओपियम एटसेट्रा, या फिर कॉटन भी हो गया. So all of them are going to be promoted, right? Food grains are going to be edged out. What is going to be the outcome? Famines. क्यों? Food grains का shortage हो रहा है and prices of food grains is also increasing. But real reason for famine? तो क्या मतलब हर शॉर्टेज ऑफ फूड ग्रेन्स इज इट ऑलवेज गोइंग टू लीड टू फैमिन? जरूरी है ऐसा? नहीं. लैंड रेवेन्यू भी अपनी जगह पे ठीक है, लेकिन कमर्शियलाइजेशन इज गोइंग टू प्ले अ डायरेक्ट रोल इन दैट. नहीं. देखो, ये जो कमर्शियलाइज्ड क्रॉप्स हैं, इनका मार्केट इंडिया में है या फिर ग्लोबल मार्केट में है? ग्लोबल मार्केट में है. So Indian farmers are going to be exposed to the highly volatile global market, right? तो थोड़ा सा अपस्विंग होता है, अगर मार्केट में प्राइसेस बढ़ते हैं तो फायदा कौन उठाएगा? कंपनी या फार्मर्स को मिलेगा फायदा? मेजॉरिटी फायदा कंपनी को मिलेगा, थोड़ा सा हो सकता है फायदा फार्मर्स को मिल जाए. लेकिन जैसे ही प्राइसेस कम होते हैं, द एंटायर बर्डन इज गोइंग टू बी शिफ्टेड ऑन दी फार्मर्स. ठीक है. तो इवन व्हेन देयर इज अ बम्पर क्रॉप, मान लो कॉटन की फसल बहुत अच्छी हुई है, व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन टू द ग्लोबल प्राइसेस? अचानक से क्रैश हो जाएंगे, राइट? एंड फार्मर सुसाइड्स कब ज्यादा बढ़ेंगे? जब बम्पर क्रॉप्स होते हैं. तो वो तो फार्मर सुसाइड तो अभी का एग्जांपल है. उस समय क्या होता था? बिकॉज ऑफ द क्रैश इन द फार्मर्स इनकम, they were not able to purchase food grains which were short in supply and high in prices. तो पूरे के पूरे रीजन, इलाके के इलाके साल 2 साल में पूरे खाली हो जाते थे. ठीक है. सो दैट इज व्हाट यूज्ड टू हैपन. तो इस तरह के हमको चेंजेस देखने के लिए अब मिलने लगेंगे. देन व्हिच अदर काइंड्स ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल्स आर नीडेड? आयरन ओर चाहिए ब्रिटिश इंडस्ट्रीज को सेटअप करने के लिए, ब्रिटेन में रेलवे सेटअप करने के लिए, शिप्स बनाने के लिए, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट करने के लिए. कहां से आएगा? कहां से आएगा? हिंदुस्तान से आएगा. एंड आयरन इंडस्ट्री कोल इंडस्ट्री के बिना चल सकता है? नहीं चल सकता है. दैट इज व्हाई iron and coal industries were also set up during this period. Any changes in the social and cultural policy? Now, a priority of the company at this point of time is to establish India as a huge consumer of British products. तो अब क्या कोशिश करेंगे अंग्रेज? इंडिया को वेस्टर्नाइज कर दो. And what is going to be the best medium for westernization? Education. ठीक है. So the first concerted efforts for the development of education are going to be visible during this period. Then another way to westernize India is to Christianize India. So now it is going to be a matter of state policy to promote Christianity in India. Another way to westernize India is to model the Indian society along the lines of the Western society. As compared to the Western society, Indian society was having some shortcomings. क्या? There were a number of social evils. तो अब उन social evils को reform करने के लिए कौन सा रूट लिया जाएगा? डंडे का या लॉ का? लॉ का. So a number of social reform legislation is also going to be introduced. ठीक है? What about the policy of or philosophy of Orientalism? Is it going to hold the same currency? No. It is going to be replaced by an entirely new way of thinking. तो two primary philosophies emerge होंगे. कौन कौन से? Utilitarianism and liberalism, right? Utilitarianism क्या भला है? What does it say? That it is not possible for the state to make everybody happy. ठीक है? तो हर स्टेट पॉलिसी से कोई खुश होगा, कोई नाराज होगा. But those actions are good, those actions are valid, which bring the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. ठीक है? And who has the role to bring about these changes? भारत भाग्य विधाता कौन है इसमें? State है. And how is the state going to bring about changes? Through legislation, laws. So अब laws are going to be used to make important changes. सबसे पहला तो ये बात समझ में आना चाहिए. ठीक है? अच्छा. Why do you think the state is convinced of the need to make changes? Because now its opinion about the Indian past and Indian society, Indian civilization has changed. अब ये लोग क्या मानने लग गए हैं? हाँ, that they are in India to reform India, to civilize India. तो Indian civilization को deny कर दिया जाएगा. That nothing like Indian civilization exists. Indians are backward, barbaric, superstitious. They are inward looking. They are regressive. There are a number of social evils. Ancient India mein there was no great progress, right? And who has the responsibility of bringing the light of civilization in India? Angrez. So the concept of white man's burden is going to be introduced. क्या है white man's burden? एटलस का स्टैचू देखा है? कैसा? कंधे पे पूरी दुनिया को टिकाया हुआ है. What if Atlas shrugs? क्या होगा? दुनिया गिर जाएगी. Civilization is going to end. So, like Atlas, it is the responsibility of the Western civilizer to civilize the barbaric natives. ठीक है? Now, in order to bring about these civilizing reforms, the state is going to rely upon legislation. ये आइडिया है. तो बोथ यूटिलिटेरियनिज्म एंड लिबरलिज्म में ये दोनों चीजें कॉमन है. ठीक है? डिफरेंस कहां पे है? एंड प्रोडक्ट में. यूटिलिटेरियनिज्म का एंड प्रोडक्ट क्या है? अल्टीमेटली इंडियंस आर गोइंग टू बिकम सिविलाइज्ड एंड दे कैन बी इंडिपेंडेंट. लिबरलिज्म का एंड प्रोडक्ट क्या है? इंडियंस विल ऑलवेज नीड द गाइडिंग हैंड ऑफ द ब्रिटिश टू कीप देम सिविलाइज्ड. अगर ब्रिटिश रूल इंडिया में खत्म होगा तो इंडियंस क्या होंगे? वापस अनसिविलाइज्ड हो जाएंगे. ठीक है? सो ये अब चेंजेस देखने के लिए शुरू हो जाएंगे. फॉलो कर रहे हो ना? अच्छा. बस ये वाला समझ लो। थर्ड फेज कौन सा था? फाइनेंशियल कैपिटलिज्म। फ्रॉम 1858 ऑनवर्ड्स। So during the phase of industrial capitalism, the British had tried to bring about changes in every sphere of Indian life. Negative result क्या निकला था इसका? Indians परेशान होकर के they revolted, Great Revolt of 1857. So now what are the British going to do? They are going to follow a more cautious policy. ठीक है? तो political policy कैसा होगा? Is it going to involve the element of imperial expansion or expansion of indirect control? Indirect control. What about the economic policy? See, by this point of time, ब्रिटेन में हो गया है इंडस्ट्रियल सैचुरेशन, ठीक है? सो दैट मीन्स द इंडस्ट्रियल मार्केट ऑफ ब्रिटेन, द इन्वेस्टमेंट मार्केट इन ब्रिटेन हैज बिकम सैचुरेटेड. अगर आप वहां पे एक नया पैसा निकाल लगाते हो तो यू विल नॉट गेट अ गुड रिटर्न, राइट? England has entered the stage of the middle income trap. Therefore, the British are now searching for new opportunities to invest their accumulated capital. अब यहाँ पे इनको ज्यादा रिटर्न्स इंग्लैंड में मिलने नहीं वाले हैं, तो दे आर लुकिंग फॉर ओवरसीज अपॉर्चुनिटीज. एंड ओवरसीज में सबसे अट्रैक्टिव डेस्टिनेशन कौन सा इमर्ज होगा? इंडिया. ये उनके कब्जे में है, उनके कंट्रोल में है, ठीक है? सो नाउ इंडिया हैज टू बी मेड एन अट्रैक्टिव एवेन्यू फॉर ब्रिटिश इन्वेस्टमेंट. क्लियर? एंड फायदा क्या होगा इससे? ऑल द प्रॉफिट दैट दे मेक दे आर गोइंग टू शिप इट ऑफ टू ब्रिटेन. ठीक है? सो British investment is going to be attracted to India on a large scale. Ultimate objective क्या है? कि इंडिया में ब्रिटेन जैसा इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन करो और सारा का सारा प्रॉफिट अपनी जेब में रख लो, राइट? बट फॉर इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट बेसिक रिक्वायरमेंट्स हैव टू बी फुलफिल्ड, जैसे कि connectivity infrastructure has to be there, mining infrastructure has to be there, then ports have to be constructed, railways, telegraphs. तो इन सब में अर्ली इन्वेस्टमेंट इज गोइंग टू बी इनवाइटेड, ठीक है? लेकिन फायदा नुकसान क्या है, मतलब प्रॉब्लम क्या है यहाँ पर? दैट इंडिया है अंग्रेजों के कंट्रोल में, राइट? यूजुअली प्राइवेट जो इन्वेस्टमेंट होता है ये अपने रिस्क पर होता है, राइट? प्राइवेट रिस्क पर होता है. The greater the risk, greater the reward. लेकिन यहाँ पे क्या दिक्कत हुई? That private investment was invited, but it was guaranteed by the government of India. कि अंग्रेज अपना पैसा इंडिया में लगाएंगे, regardless of whether that venture does well or fails. The British investors were guaranteed a return of 5% return. ठीक है? तो नई रेलवे लाइन ले करी गई मालगाड़ियों के लिए, मान लो काम नहीं कर रही है, फिर भी इंडियन टैक्स पेयर्स को अंग्रेजों को एक तो पूरा का पूरा इन्वेस्टमेंट वापस करना है, उसके ऊपर से एनुअल रिटर्न्स भी देने हैं 5% के. ये क्लियर है? अच्छा, व्हाट अबाउट द सोशल पॉलिसी? कोई चेंजेस आएंगे? पहले क्या कर रहे थे ये लोग? अ नंबर ऑफ सोशल रिफॉर्म लेजिस्लेशन, ये भी पासा उल्टा पड़ गया था, राइट? People had become very disenchanted. They saw the British interference as an undue interference into the internal matters of Indian life. तो अब अंग्रेज क्या करेंगे? They are going to follow a conservative policy. इसके पहले अपने आप से बिना पूछे हुए लोगों के कभी सती बैन कर दे रहे हैं, कभी चाइल्ड मैरिज बैन कर दे रहे हैं, कभी विडो रीमैरिज को अलाउ कर दे रहे हैं. अब क्या होगा? Until and unless there is a general demand for social reform, तब तक ये सोशल रिफॉर्म नहीं इंट्रोड्यूस करेंगे, ठीक है? What about their cultural policy? अभी तक क्या बोल रहे थे कि हम आए इंडिया को सिविलाइज करने के लिए, मॉडर्नाइज करने के लिए, राइट? नाउ व्हाट आर दे गोइंग टू से? इंडियंस इतनी गई गुजरी कौम है, ये कभी सिविलाइज मॉडर्नाइज हो ही नहीं सकते हैं, ठीक है? तो इनको इनके हाल पर छोड़ दो। रादर दे अडॉप्टेड अ racial attitude towards Indians, ठीक है? They tried to emphasize that the British race, the white people, are inherently superior to the Indians, that they are the master race, Indians are subhumans. And what is going to be the destiny of the subhuman class? To perpetually remain under the control of the master race. So this was the new means of justifying British rule in India. ठीक है? Then they had also seen another thing कि Great Revolt of 1857 में बड़ा सा झटका मिला था. And what was the biggest strength of the Great Revolt? हिंदू मुस्लिम यूनिटी. तो अब क्या करना है? इनको डिवाइड करना है, कीप देम डिवाइडेड. सो दे आर गोइंग टू इंट्रोड्यूस द पॉलिसी ऑफ डिवाइड एंड रूल. ठीक है? अब वो भूलेगा तो नहीं ना दैट बेसिक इंसेंटिव क्या है अंग्रेजों की पॉलिसी चेंज के पीछे? द चेंजिंग इकोनॉमिक इंटरेस्ट एंड देयर वेरियस पॉलिसीज, cultural, social, economic, political and administrative, are going to be in response to these changing priorities, changing economic interests. Clear? 3 phases याद रहेगा ना? ठीक है. तो once we come back, तो अब इसके बाद नया वाला कौन सा सेक्शन है? A glimpse of 18th century India. तो इसको कवर करने की कोशिश करेंगे. ठीक है? Okay, so now we have to talk about important developments in 18th century India. First thing, the downfall of the Mughal Empire. तो इसके पीछे factors देखने हैं हमको. Different sets of factors have been suggested by different sets of historians, right? For example, the first set of historians have blamed Aurangzeb for his mistakes. According to them, the mistakes of Aurangzeb played the most significant role in the decline of the Mughal Empire. Now, what were the mistakes of Aurangzeb? His orthodox religious policy. What had he done? Had he continued the religious policy of Akbar or had he deviated from it? He had deviated from it. किस तरह की policies अपनाई इसने? Forcible conversions, reintroduction of jizya, destruction of temples, discriminating against non-Muslims in matters of state employment, etc. What was the outcome of all of this? That the broad social base that Akbar had created through his religious liberalism, that became narrower and narrower. The state started to lose the support of the bulk of the population that was non-Muslim. And as a result, what is going to happen? A number of revolts are going to happen. Resentment among the non-Muslim population started to rise. Okay? So this was one mistake. Kya? The religious policy of Aurangzeb. Second, his Rajput policy. अकबर का क्या राजपूत पॉलिसी था? The policy of carrot and stick, right? So those rulers, those Rajput chiefs who voluntarily submitted and joined their hands with Akbar, they were rewarded. Matrimonial alliances were also made. Aurangzeb, is he going to follow this policy? No. He maintained the Rajputs at an arm's length distance. Okay? Now, those scholars who point out this policy change as a reason for the decline of the Mughal Empire, they say that Aurangzeb also violated the trust that had been established between the Mughals and the Rajputs. Akbar ने क्या promise किया था? That if you submit to me voluntarily, I am not going to interfere in your internal matters. I am not going to interfere in your religious matters. What did Aurangzeb start doing? He started to interfere in their internal political and religious matters. he demanded jizya, he mediated in the succession dispute at Jodhpur. What is the result? Rajput rebellions. So, दो तरह से नुकसान हुआ. First of all, the Rajputs, who were acting as the sword arm of the empire, now suddenly pulled away their support. Not only did they pull away their support from the Mughals, but they also engaged the Mughals in a lengthy rebellion. Okay? So the Mughals lost the support of their most loyal allies and now had earned the enmity of the Rajputs. So this weakened the empire even further. The third mistake is Deccan policy, right? What had Aurangzeb done in the context of Deccan? He had annexed Bijapur and Golconda. What should he have done? He should have maintained Bijapur and Golconda as a buffer between the Mughals and a new rising power, the Marathas. So Aurangzeb's conquest of the Deccan brought the Mughals into direct conflict against the Marathas. And what was the nature of the Maratha revolt? Was it a political rebellion led by the elites? No, it was a popular movement which had the support of the people, right? And as a result, the Deccan issue became an ulcer. Okay? Now, the result was that the Mughals were not able to extract themselves from the Deccan region. They continued to invest more and more money, send more and more men to fight in the Deccan. इसका कोई फायदा मिल रहा था? नहीं. First of all, Deccan soil was not very fertile. Second, Mughal control was also tenuous. Third, the Mughals had to face several defeats which weakened them, which also shattered their military prestige. Before this, there was a myth that Mughals are invincible. That myth was suddenly shattered by the Marathas. Now, after the Marathas, who are going to be emboldened? The other adversaries of the Mughals. They will start thinking, if the Marathas can defeat the Mughals, तो हम में क्या कमी है? हमने भी सेम दाल चावल खाया है. We can also defeat the Mughals. ठीक है? अच्छा. And finally, because Aurangzeb remained confined in the Deccan for the later half of his rule, therefore North Indian affairs were neglected. There was an administrative breakdown. ठीक है? So the Deccan ulcer was not only harming the health of the Mughal Empire in the Deccan region, it had also spread to the rest of the empire. Even the healthy portions, even the healthy provinces were now facing the problems because of this Deccani ulcer. Clear है ये? समझ में आया ना? अच्छा, ये हो गया the Deccan policy. Another similar mistake, the Sikh policy. क्या किया औरंगजेब ने? He tortured and executed the 9th Sikh Guru. He had failed to anticipate or to perceive the true nature of the Sikh rebellion. He had thought that it was simply a political rebellion, but it was actually a popular rebellion. The Sikh Guru had the support of the common masses among the Sikhs. Now, after his torture and execution, Guru Tegh Bahadur is going to become a martyr, a symbol around which other Sikhs could organize themselves. And this gave the opportunity to the 10th Sikh Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, to introduce the Khalsa, the Sikh military order. So the Sikhs emerged as a proto-nationalist state entity with its own military. Lengthy warfare is going to continue. Okay? Sure. So they became a strong military power under Guru Gobind Singh and were ultimately able to drive the Mughals out of the Punjab. Okay? So this is one set of factors, the mistakes of Aurangzeb. क्या-क्या देखा है हमने? The religious policy, the Rajput policy, Deccan policy and the Sikh policy. Clear? Sure. Then another set of historians point to the crisis of personality that was witnessed in the Mughal Empire during the 18th century. What does this mean, crisis of personality? This is talking about the weak successors of Aurangzeb. right? After Aurangzeb, what was the character of the rulers? Did they have a strong or a weak personality? Weak personality. Were they able governors? Able administrators? Did they have a good understanding of the economy? Were they good militarily? No. Now, the Mughal Empire, उसका structure कैसा था? Decentralized or highly centralized? It was highly centralized. Therefore, the emperor would always have to be somebody with an extremely strong personality. And as soon as a weak ruler is going to ascend to the throne, what is going to happen to the prestige of the crown? It is going to degrade, right? And result kya hoga? The emperor will be unable to command the loyalty and respect of the powerful nobles. Decentralization is going to take place. Okay? Second thing that they mean by this crisis of personality was that the Mughal nobility of the 18th century was characterless. Now, before this, the Mughal nobility, according to these historians, had been motivated by the vision of a strong and powerful Mughal empire. In the 18th century, अब क्या हुआ? These people became power hungry, selfish, opportunistic. Instead of loyally serving the interests of the state, they were more interested in their selfish, vested interests. ठीक है? So at the first sign of weakness, what should a good administrator, a good noble have done? He should have emerged as the supporter of the weak ruler. But इन लोगों ने क्या किया? They decided to break away from the Mughal Empire and establish their own kingdoms. ठीक है? So this is what it means by crisis of personality. तो दो फैक्टर्स देखे हमने, क्या क्या? Mistakes of Aurangzeb and crisis of personality. Then we come to the more institutional factors. जैसे कि the मनसबदारी crisis. You remember the मनसबदारी system ना? क्या था मनसबदारी? A system of dual ranking which was introduced by Akbar in order to provide effective administration, both civil and military, in order to increase the centrality of the emperor and in order to organize the Mughal aristocracy into a merit-based hierarchy. ठीक है? What were the important ingredients for success? क्या क्या थे? First of all, the continuation of the functional relationship between the emperor and the mansabdar. That the emperor should be in a position to reliably reward loyal service of the mansabdars. And उसके लिए क्या चाहिए होगा? Continuous territorial conquest. That is one thing. Second thing, the emperor should be a person who should be able to command the loyalty and respect of the mansabdar. So he should have a strong personality, right? So these were the two basic ingredients required for success of the mansabdari system. अब क्या problem हुआ यहाँ पर? That the size of the empire, although it continued growing, but it was not growing at the same rate as the size of the mansabdari. Now, mansabdari of the Mughals, homogeneous institution or heterogeneous institution? Extremely heterogeneous. There were a number of different parties such as Iranis, Turanis, Deccanis, Afghans, Hindustanis, Rajputs, etc. Right? Earlier, all of them owed their loyalty only and only to the emperor. Right? But later, अब क्या होगा? Now, under the weak rulers, these people are going to start to owe their loyalty to the leader of their own party, to the leader of their own faction. And what is going to be the ultimate objective? To somehow or the other establish complete control over the Mughal emperor. Because all the important decisions, all the mansabdari appointments, Jagir appointments, they have to be done in the name of the emperor only. So whoever controls the emperor controls all the reins of power, all the money. Okay? So now what is going to happen? Is the Mughal mansabdari going to act as the strength of the empire or the biggest weakness of the empire? Biggest weakness. There are going to be internal warfare, internal dispute. The Mughal court is going to become a playground for court intrigues. There are going to be a number of conspiracies. Conspiracies are going to be hatched by the ambitious nobles with the foreign enemies of the Mughal emperor as well. On several occasions, these people are even going to invite foreign invaders to come and attack the Mughal emperor. For example, Ahmad Shah Abdali was invited by the Nawab of Awadh. ठीक है, तो इस तरह से यहाँ पे डिजेनरेशन होने लग जाएगा. Is this clear? अच्छा. Why do you think the Mansabdari crisis has taken a crisis proportion? तो इसके साथ एक और क्राइसिस एसोसिएटेड है. What is that? The Jagirdari crisis. What do you understand by the term Jagirdari crisis? The problems faced by the Mughal Empire due to the rising shortage of Jagirs. है ना? So why was shortage of Jagirs taking place? Number of Mansabdars was increasing. Availability of Jagirs was not. ठीक है? So competition is going to increase for the Jagirs. What is going to happen to the Mansabdari crisis as a result? That is going to become even more intense. What was the function of the Jagir? Jagirs were given to the Mansabdars as what? As their salaries, as well as to account for their military expenditure. Now, if there is a shortage of Jagirs, is it going to have any effect on the military preparedness? Kya? Positive or negative impact? Negative impact. So, military weakness is also going to be an outcome of the Jagirdari crisis. Is this clear? Achha. Now, the Jagirdars are going to be extremely uncertain about their position. कि मान लो आपकी पार्टी ने establish कर लिया है complete control over the emperor, right? Therefore, you have been given a very lucrative Jagir, a large Jagir, right? But you are extremely uncertain when the political situation in Delhi is going to change. Maybe another party comes to power. वो क्या करेगा? आपसे जागीरदारी छीन करके किसी और को दे देगा. So, are you going to see the Jagir as a long-term investment or a short-term investment? Short-term investment. क्या कोशिश करोगे आप? कि जितना ज्यादा से ज्यादा यहाँ से एक्सट्रैक्ट कर सकते हैं, एक्सट्रैक्ट करके निकल लो, कल का पता नहीं है. So these Jagirdars started to view their Jagir assignments as cash cows, and they started to extract as much surplus from these Jagirs as possible. इसका खामियाजा किसको भुगतना पड़ेगा? The cultivators, the producers. So peasant unrest is going to increase. Jagirdars are going to charge a number of illegal cesses, illegal taxes, abwabs as well. ठीक है? And this Jagirdari crisis is going to intensify the agrarian distress and the agrarian resentment as well. And ये resentment अपने आप को कैसे manifest करेगा? In the form of the agrarian crisis. When we say agrarian crisis in the context of the Mughal Empire, what are we talking about? The rising frequency of agrarian rebellions against the Mughals. Why? Burden of taxation is increasing. एक तो जागीरदारी मनसबदारी क्राइसिस की वजह से इंक्रीज हो रहा है. सेकंड क्यों इंक्रीज हो रहा है? मिलिट्री रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द स्टेट इज इंक्रीजिंग, देयरफॉर लैंड रेवेन्यू का बर्डन स्टेट भी इंक्रीज कर रहा है. ठीक है? अच्छा. नाउ the third reason why the agrarian crisis became such an important and a very serious issue was because of the changing religious policy of the state. In the 15-16 century किस तरह का policy, 16-17 century किस तरह का policy था? Liberal policy follow कर रहे थे. Towards the end of the 17th century, orthodox policy. 18th century, orthodox policy. Bulk of the cultivator population, Muslim or non-Muslim? Non-Muslim है. Now, non-Muslim cultivators were facing economic pressure. They were having a political grudge against the Mughal emperor, right? But because of the religious distinction, ये जो पॉलिटिकल एंड इकोनॉमिक ग्रज है, रेजेंटमेंट है, ये कैसे मैनिफेस्ट करेगा अपने आप को? इन द फॉर्म ऑफ अ रिलीजियस आउटपोरिंग, ठीक है? तो ऑल द पेजेंट रिबेलियंस ऑफ द 18th century are going to be cloaked within the cloak of a religious uprising. तो बेसिक जो grievances हैं, they are political and economic in nature, but the rebellions are going to manifest themselves as religious uprisings. Clear है? And that is why they are going to be extremely popular as well. And यहाँ पे leadership कौन provide करेगा? The natural leaders of the peasants. Who are they? The zamindars, not jagirdars. The zamindars. Jagirdar to Mughal representative hai. Zamindar is a person who has been present in that same village for hundreds of years, right? For several generations. He shares the same caste, same religion as the people who are cultivating the land in that village. So he is going to emerge as the natural leader of the peasants. एंड ये पेजेंट्स की रेजेंटमेंट को अपने पॉलिटिकल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स को फुलफिल करने के लिए अब यूज करने लगेंगे. कैसे? दे आर गोइंग टू कार्व आउट देयर ओन प्रिंसिपैलिटीज बाय रिबेलिंग अगेंस्ट द मुगल एम्पायर. मुगल एम्पायर को इस पूरे के पूरे प्रोसेस में क्या क्या नुकसान होगा? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, लॉस ऑफ सॉवरेनिटी इन दोज रीजन्स जहां पे इंडिपेंडेंट पेजेंट एम्पायर्स इमर्ज हो गए हैं, किंगडम्स इमर्ज हो गए हैं, जैसे कि जाट किंगडम, रोहिला किंगडम, द सिख किंगडम, मराठा किंगडम, एटसेट्रा. Right? Second, what is going to be the effect on the treasury? एक तो the entire source of income disappears. Second, rebellion को suppress करने में खर्चा उसके ऊपर से और ज्यादा हो रहा है. So on the whole, beneficial or harmful for the Mughal Empire? Harmful for the Mughal Empire. ठीक है? In this process, we also have to talk about the technological backwardness of not only the Mughals but also all contemporary Indian powers as compared to the Europeans, right? European civilization ने क्या क्या अभी तक देख चुके थे वो लोग? They had already witnessed the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, right? Towards the second half of the 18th century, industrialization had also started in Britain. इंडिया में क्या थे? अभी भी हम लोग मेडिवलिज्म में रुके हुए थे. सोसाइटी यूनिफाइड और फ्रैगमेंटेड? फ्रैगमेंटेड. पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर कैसा? characterized by absolutism and feudalism. और यूरोप में, ब्रिटेन में, the first beginnings of democracy, constitutionalism, constitutional monarchy, all of that had started. So India में, do you think any element of nationalism was there? No. The British had established, the Europeans had established large trading companies which were trading not only with India but the rest of the world as well. Were there any similar concerns in India also? No such a similar entities in India. India का overseas trade that had always been mortgaged to outsiders. Indians में यहाँ पे इंडिया में इस तरह का कमर्शियल डेवलपमेंट हुआ ही नहीं था, कैपिटलिज्म आया ही नहीं था जैसा कि यूरोप में देखने के लिए मिल रहा था. Now, because of private capital being invested towards warfare, what are the advantages that the Europeans had? First of all, better resources, better ability to mobilize an army, modern equipment, better logistics because of higher naval development, right? Better military strategy also. Plus society was also more open, more egalitarian. अपने यहाँ पे क्या चल रहा था? Feudalism. कि if you are not born into the correct family, can you ever become the top general? नहीं हो सकता है. यूरोप में ऐसा चल रहा था? No. Clive, the son of a common baker, Ayerkut, the son of a blacksmith, right? Who were these people? These were the early empire builders in India, right? And this problem और ये इस तरह का फिनोमेना इंडिया में नहीं हो पा रहा था. दिक्कत क्या होगी इसकी वजह से? The talent pool of the leadership is going to be very very limited, right? इंडिया में क्या है? बचपन से पता था कि at the end I am going to have a comfortable life. My name is going to be written in the pages of history, right? बाहर क्या हो रहा था? People had to rise through the ranks by proving their merit, right? So only the most capable would rise to the highest positions. In India ऐसा कुछ देखने के लिए मिल रहा था? नहीं. So essentially the Indian civilization, which was still medieval, was coming into conflict with the Western civilization which had stepped into modernity. And हमेशा ऐसे इस तरह के clashes में क्या होगा? the one which is more advanced, one which is more developed, they are always going to win. The same thing happened in India as well. Then the Mughal Empire was also weakened by foreign invasions. Two significant foreign invasions in the 18th century. 1739, Nadir Shah, ruler of Persia. In 1761, Ahmad Shah Abdali, ruler of Afghanistan. दोनों बार किसको हराया? The Mughals. Initially the Mughals representing themselves, later the Marathas representing the Mughals. What do you think was the impact on the Mughal prestige? That was completely shattered. किसी भी ruling entity का what is the first duty of the government? Defense, right? So defense is the first duty of the government. People of India are going to lose confidence in the ability of the Mughals to defend them. So are they going to support the Mughals in the future? No. So there is going to be a huge loss of prestige. Further, seeing that if these foreign invaders can come from Persia and Afghanistan and completely smash the Mughals, बाकी और भी लोग देख रहे थे these developments को, such as the British, the French, etc. So they are going to become more and more ambitious, bolder and bolder. Okay? So this is how the doom of the Mughal Empire was spelled. And finally, 18th century में एक और process हुआ. क्या? As the Mughal Empire disintegrated, it was replaced by a number of new powers, new kingdoms, such as Bengal, Awadh, Hyderabad, the Marathas, the Sikhs, right? Rohilkhand, the Jat kingdom, independent Rajput kingdoms, Travancore, etc. ठीक है? As these became more and more powerful, Mughal emperor became weaker and weaker. Clear है? So these are the factors behind the downfall of the Mughal Empire. समझ में आया है? Can we move ahead? Second major development in the 18th century, the rise of regional kingdoms. ठीक है? So as we have just seen यहाँ पर that several regional powers emerged during the 18th century. Right? Now historians tend to divide these regional powers into three different categories: successor states, rebel kingdoms, and the independent kingdoms. Successor states के examples: Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad. Rebel kingdoms: the Sikhs, Marathas, Jats, and the Afghans. And independent kingdoms: Mysore, Travancore, and Rajput kingdoms. Why are the successor states known as the successor states? They used to be once a part of the Mughal Empire. They used to be the different provinces, different subas of the Mughal Empire. ठीक है? Later, what did the governors of these Mughal provinces do? They declared independence. They carved out their own kingdoms, right? These were not completely independent. They were semi-independent. So nominally, they continued to recognize the authority of the Mughal emperor. But in all practical matters, they were completely sovereign. Okay? Now, because these were earlier full-fledged provinces of the Mughal emperor, so are there going to be any similarities between the administration of the Mughal empire and these kingdoms? Same आपको administrative machinery continue होते हुए दिखेगी. That is why they are known as the successor kingdoms. Examples कौन-कौन से तीन बताओ? Bengal, Awadh and Hyderabad. दूसरे हैं rebel states. ठीक है? So these kingdoms emerged in the erstwhile territory of the Mughal Empire. यानी कि एक जमाने में ये मुगल एम्पायर का ही इलाका हुआ करता था. But the powers that established their independent kingdoms in these territories, they did so by successfully fighting against the Mughals, by rebelling against the Mughals. तो बताओ, level of administrative similarity greater than, the same as, or lesser than the successor kingdoms? Lesser than the successor kingdoms, right? So there are going to be some similarities, but some differences also, some modifications also. Examples बताओ? The Sikhs, Marathas, Afghans, Jats, etc. ठीक है? Then we have the independent kingdoms. ये कौन से किंगडम्स होंगे? These are going to be those kingdoms which were never part of the Mughal Empire. ठीक है, तो या तो ये एक मुगल एम्पायर की टेरिटरी के बाहर थे, और if they accepted Mughal overlordship, then they enjoyed internal independence, internal autonomy. So that means they were allowed to continue with their traditional administration. So here the degree of administrative similarity between the Mughals and these kingdoms is going to be the least. कोई सिमिलैरिटी नहीं देखने के लिए मिलेगा. ठीक है, एग्जाम्पल्स मैसूर, ट्रावनकोर एंड दी राजपूत किंगडम्स. क्लियर है, समझ आया है? अच्छा, नाउ दिस इज अ लिस्ट ऑफ ऑल द इंपॉर्टेंट रीजनल किंगडम्स दैट इमर्ज ड्यूरिंग द 18th सेंचुरी. सबसे पहला वाला बंगाल, एस्टैब्लिश्ड इन 1713 बाय मुर्शिद कुली खान. कैपिटल मुर्शिदाबाद. कहां पर है? वेस्ट बंगाल में. ठीक है, अच्छा. नाउ मुर्शिद कुली खान हैड बीन अपॉइंटेड एज द गवर्नर, द सूबेदार ऑफ बंगाल बाय औरंगजेब. 1713 में इस बंदे ने क्या किया? ही कंबाइंड द पोजीशंस ऑफ सूबेदार एंड दीवान. ठीक है, यू रिमेंबर देयर यूज्ड टू बी एन एलिमेंट ऑफ सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर्स एट द प्रोविंशियल लेवल. तो अब वो जो एलिमेंट है अब गायब हो गया है. नाउ दिस पर्सन मुर्शिद कुली खान इज बोथ द गवर्नर एज वेल एज द इंचार्ज ऑफ रेवेन्यू एंड फाइनेंस एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. क्लियर? अच्छा, अर्लियर सूबेदार यूज्ड टू बी अपॉइंटेड बाय द मुगल एम्परर. अब इसके बाद से क्या होगा? It is going to become a hereditary position. तो इस तरह से these people have simply succeeded in matters of sovereignty from the Mughal Empire. Similar process is also going to take place at Awadh and Hyderabad, right? Now, before we talk about Awadh, the Marathas also began emerging as a major power from 1713 under the Peshwas. अब पेशवास क्या हैं? You are going to learn about them when we are talking about the Anglo-Maratha dispute. आगे जाकर के हमको डिस्कस करना है. फर्स्ट हेरिडिटरी पेशवा कौन? बालाजी विश्वनाथ. एंड व्हाट वाज द सीट ऑफ पावर ऑफ द पेशवा? पूना. ठीक है, कैपिटल पेशवा का पूना हुआ करता था. क्लियर? अच्छा, अवध established in 1722 by Saadat Hasan Khan or Saadat Khan simply. ठीक है, his titles बुरहानुल मुल्क एंड आलिजा. ठीक है, सादत हसन खान, बुरहानुल मुल्क, आलिजा. नाम अलग अलग है, बंदा वही है. इनिशियल कैपिटल फैजाबाद, लेटर शिफ्टेड टू लखनऊ. नेक्स्ट Hyderabad, established in 1724 by Chin Kilich Khan. Titles Nizamul Mulk, and after he became an independent ruler, Asaf Jah or Asaf Jah first. ठीक है, capital Hyderabad. Next we have Mysore, established in 1761 by Hyder Ali. He shifted the capital from Mysore to Seringapatam. And finally the Sikhs established their empire in 1799. The first ruler founder Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Capital Lahore. याद रहेगा? arrange in the correct chronological order the regional kingdoms which emerged in the 18th century. क्या होगा? बंगाल, अवध, ठीक है. बंगाल कब? अवध, हैदराबाद, मैसूर, चिन किलिच खान फाउंडर ऑफ हैदराबाद, सादत खान अवध, बुरहानुल मुल्क अवध. अवध ही है, ठीक है. कंफ्यूज कर दिया, चक्कर चलाया, उल्लू बनाया. एंड मैसूर का फाउंडर हैदर अली. हैदर अली ने अपने आप को सुल्तान नहीं डिक्लेयर किया. ही सिंपली रिफर्ड टू हिमसेल्फ एज कमांडर इन चीफ. ठीक है. हु वाज द फर्स्ट रूलर ऑफ मैसूर टू डिक्लेयर हिमसेल्फ एज सुल्तान? टीपू सुल्तान. यानी कि जब हैदर अली बिकेम किंग, there must have already been some ruler. Mysore was ruled by whom? One of the successor dynasties of the Vijayanagar Empire. This was known as the Wadiyar dynasty. ठीक है. वोडिया डायनेस्टी का जो रूलर था, he was already a weak ruler. He was under the corrupt control of one of his ministers. तो हैदर अली ने सिंपली जो किंग मेकर की पोजीशन है वहां पे चेंज किया. He replaced that corrupt minister and became the new king maker. Right? And finally we arrive at the beginning of British conquest in India. तो यहाँ पे क्या क्या बात करनी है? We have to talk about टू इंपॉर्टेंट वॉर्स. कौन कौन से? नहीं. एंग्लो बंगाल वॉर एंड द कर्नाटिक वॉर्स, ऑल्सो नोन एज द एंग्लो फ्रेंच वॉर्स. विद इन द एंग्लो बंगाल वॉर टू बैटल्स. कौन कौन से? प्लासी एंड बक्सर. एंड कर्नाटिक वॉर्स में कितने? 3 वॉर्स. 4 नहीं है, 3 है. 3 वॉर्स हैं. मैसूर में 4 वॉर्स हैं. ठीक है. फर्स्ट वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट द कर्नाटिक वॉर्स और द एंग्लो फ्रेंच वॉर्स. तो बताओ कहां पे हो रहे थे? किस यहाँ पे होंगे? यहाँ पे होंगे, यहाँ पे होंगे, इधर या इधर? थर्ड वाले में, फोर्थ वाले में? थर्ड वाले में. इस वाले रीजन में हो रहा है. ठीक है. Carnatic used to refer to the hinterland of the Coromandel coast. ठीक है. तो ये वाला जो रीजन है इसको कर्नाटिक बोला जाता है. ठीक है. नाउ यू रिमेंबर 1724 में a new regional kingdom had emerged in South India. कौन सा? हैदराबाद. अंडर whom? चिन किलिच खान. असफजादी फर्स्ट. ठीक है. नाउ असफजादी फर्स्ट also relied upon the support of his important nobles. Therefore, the rights of a particular noble had been recognized in the Carnatic region and इसको टाइटल मिल गया था नवाब का. So apart from the Nizam of Hyderabad, you also had the Nawab of the Carnatic. हैदराबाद का कैपिटल हैदराबाद, कर्नाटक का कैपिटल आरकट, प्रेजेंट डे तमिलनाडु में। ठीक है, यहां तक की कहानी क्लियर है? अच्छा, नाउ लेट अस टॉक अबाउट द फैक्टर्स बिहाइंड द कर्नाटिक वॉर्स। तो अब ये बताओ, विच टू साइड्स आर फाइटिंग? A European power with an Indian power, an Indian power with an Indian power, or European power with European power? All three are correct. ठीक है, so this was actually a conflict between the Europeans themselves, यानी कि French company and British company were trying to settle their scores, but they were not fighting directly. They were fighting through proxies. Okay. Now, what were those factors which had created the conditions for this conflict? तो कई सारे फैक्टर्स देखने के लिए मिलेंगे. You remember बेसिक ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ द यूरोपियन कंपनीज इंडिया में क्या होता था? टू मैक्सिमाइज देयर प्रॉफिट, टू एस्टैब्लिश अ ट्रेड मोनोपोली. ठीक है, now by this point of time, the mid of the 18th century, the Dutch had been eliminated, Portuguese had been eliminated, Danes had been eliminated. Only two people were remaining, two powers were remaining. कौन? The British East India Company and the French East India Company. Plus, both of them were also heavily invested in the trade of India. For example, by 1740, the British East India Company's trade volume accounted for roughly 10% of the British GDP. So, do you think the British could have afforded losing their control over India's trade? नहीं हो सकता था. It would have been a catastrophe. Similarly, the French East India Company, although it was a latecomer, but over the past several decades, its trade had been expanding significantly, especially in South India. And by 1740, its trade was roughly half the volume of British trade. So once again, a huge chunk of the French GDP. So neither of them could have afforded to lose their trading relationship in India. ठीक है? But mercantilist thinking was dominating the economic policy of those periods. Therefore, both of them wanted to establish their complete monopolies. They were not satisfied in simply sharing India's overseas trade. ठीक है? तो अपनी सक्सेस के लिए दूसरे को खत्म करना जरूरी है. This was the idea. Clear? Sure. Now, talking about this further, what was the status of financial health of these companies? Were they in the black या red में चल रहे थे? ब्लैक मतलब, इन दी ब्लैक मतलब बहुत अच्छा प्रॉफिट हो रहा है, इन दी रेड मतलब ये सारे के सारे लाल में खाते लेके जा रहे हैं. सब लाल में चल रहा था. तो these were not very, you can say, they were not making large amounts of profit. In fact, most of them were making losses. Both of them were making losses. Real reason behind the losses? Internal corruption. ठीक है? Now, both their governments had given the monopoly to these companies themselves. ठीक है? That means whenever it comes to shipping or trading goods between India and Europe, किसका कंट्रोल होना चाहिए? If you are an English trader, तो English कंपनी का कंट्रोल होना चाहिए. French trader, तो French कंपनी का कंट्रोल होना चाहिए. Right? Had the government given the authority to the employees of the company to conduct this trade? No. But these people were misusing the company's monopolistic right to conduct their private trade. Therefore, they were diverting a large amount of trade revenue away from the company towards their own private trade. ठीक है, लेकिन अपने करप्शन को ये लोग एडमिट तो कर नहीं सकते, राइट? सो व्हाट आर दे गोइंग टू ब्लेम? दे आर गोइंग टू ब्लेम ईच अदर. सरकार थोड़ी सी मदद कर दो, इसको एक बार खत्म कर दिया ना, everything is going to be in the black. So that is what they argued, and thus the basic conditions for conflict were created. होना ही होना था. But could these people have fought in India had there been political stability in India? No. ठीक है? So political instability also played a significant role in creating the conditions for the Carnatic Wars. आसफ जा याद है? He died in 1748. इसके बाद क्या होगा? A succession dispute is going to break out. Nawab of Carnatic, his name was Anwaruddin. He also died in 1748. ठीक है? अच्छा, यहां पे क्या होगा? आर्कट में भी सक्सेशन डिस्प्यूट. So two different parties are going to emerge and both of them are going to claim the right to rule their respective kingdoms. अब यहाँ पे अंग्रेजों को और फ्रेंच को तरकीब सूझेगी. क्या? Let us support one of these contenders. If we are successful in placing them on the throne, तो वो क्या करेंगे? They are going to expel the other company, right? So फ्रेंच ने ये पॉलिसी स्टार्ट किया under their governor general Dupleix, right? And could the British have sat silently? No, they also responded in kind. तो जो बच गया था उसको कौन जाएगा लेने के लिए? उसको कौन सपोर्ट करेगा? The British company. Clear? So this political instability also created the backgrounds for the Carnatic Wars. And lastly, the Carnatic Wars were also the echoes of European politics. So the 18th century relations between the British and the French कैसे थे? फ्रेंडली और हॉस्टाइल? एक्सट्रीमली हॉस्टाइल. ये हर 10 साल में कम से कम एक दो बार लड़ते ही लड़ते थे. ठीक है? एंड एज सून एज वॉर इज गोइंग टू ब्रेक आउट इन यूरोप, इसका फायदा इंडिया में कौन उठाएगा? The British and the French trading companies, right? Why? Because they already have a number of scores to settle, and now they have the required excuse that since our countries are fighting against each other, you as a good British, me as a good French, it is our duty to fight on behalf of our countries in India as well. Okay? So European wars are going to become the background for Indian wars. कितने wars हैं टोटल? 3 wars. कौन कौन से? First, second and third Carnatic Wars. First Carnatic War 1746 to 48. It is going to start in the backdrop of a European war. कौन सा? War of Austrian succession. ठीक है? Now war has started in Europe. India में भी both the companies are looking for an opportunity. Who is going to fire the first shot? The British. क्या करेंगे अंग्रेज? They are going to confiscate some French ships in the Bay of Bengal. Are the French going to sit and tolerate this? No. what are they going to do? The French captured Madras. Significance of Madras: the headquarters of the Madras Presidency, the largest British port in the Coromandel Coast, and the first British port in India. So this was a huge setback for the British ambitions, right? However, the British will not be able to recover it. War in Europe is going to end, and with that, the war in India is also going to end. If the war ends with the cessation of hostilities in Europe, तो पीस ट्रीटी कहाँ पे होगा? इन यूरोप और इन इंडिया? इन यूरोप. In 1748, which treaty was signed? Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. ठीक है? And important provisions क्या है इसके? The cessation of hostilities and the mutual restitution of conquests. तो एक दूसरे की जो टेरिटरी, जो प्रॉपर्टी कॉन्कर करी गई है, कैप्चर करी गई है, उसको रिटर्न कर दिया जाएगा. तो ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दिस, मद्रास किसके पास था अभी तक? फ्रेंच के कब्जे में था. अब किसको वापस दे दिया जाएगा? अंग्रेजों को. बदले में अंग्रेजों को क्या मिलेगा? Some territories that they had won from the what are the French going to get? Some territories that they had lost to the British in America. ठीक है? However, real significance इस war का that lies in the Battle of Adyar or the Battle of Stenthorn. Now, after the French had captured Madras, British found themselves completely helpless. So they appealed to one of their Indian allies. कौन? नवाब of कर्नाटक. नाम था इसका नवाब अनवरुद्दीन. Now, Nawab Anwaruddin set up or raised an army of 10,000 Indian soldiers, equipped them and ordered them to march on Madras and liberate it. अब ये चले आर्कट से right towards Madras. बीच में एक छोटा सा फोर्ट पड़ता है on the banks of the Adyar river. Adyar is now located inside the city of Madras. Earlier it used to be on the outskirts of Madras. The name of this fort, Stenthorn. This was garrisoned by 300 to 500 French soldiers. सामने आर्मी कितनी बड़ी थी इंडियन सोल्जर्स की? 10,000 की. आउटकम क्या होना चाहिए था? इंडियन विक्ट्री वेरी इजीली. आउटकम हुआ क्या? फ्रेंच विक्ट्री वेरी इजीली, राइट? A number of Indian soldiers were killed, the rest were scattered. And अब क्या प्रूव हुआ? What was the significance? That even a small, well-trained and well-equipped European army is much superior than a large traditional Indian army. And अब फ्रेंच गवर्नर जनरल, क्या नाम है? डुप्ले. इसके दिमाग में एक तरकीब आएगी, क्या? That I want the British to be eliminated from India's trade. I want them to be expelled. Establish a French monopoly. I can use my army to do this. Not to fight the British directly, but to win the support of the Indian powers. I can offer my military assistance to them as a bargaining chip. ठीक है? कि आपको अपने political objectives fulfill करने के लिए मैं military help करूंगा. But in return, what do I want? A French monopoly. Is this clear? And this is going to become the background for the Second Carnatic War. Time period. (1749 to 53). Sorry. 53. Sorry, 54. 54. 1749 to 54. नाउ इस बार यूरोप में कोई वॉर नहीं हो रहा है. द कंडीशंस फॉर द वॉर हैव बीन प्रिपेयर्ड इन इंडिया इटसेल्फ. क्या कंडीशंस हैं? सक्सेशन डिस्प्यूट्स at the courts of both Hyderabad and Arcot. Hyderabad में who are the two major contenders? Nasir Jung and Muzaffar Jung. At Arcot, the two main contenders are Muhammad Ali and चंदा साहेब. तो अब डलहौजी क्या करेगा? He is going to make alliances with one each. ठीक है, one person from Hyderabad, one contender from Arcot. The French East India Company supported Muzaffar Jung and Chanda Sahib for the thrones of Hyderabad and Arcot respectively. तो इंग्लिश किसको सपोर्ट करेंगे? जो दो बच गए हैं. दी ब्रिटिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी सपोर्टेड नासिर जंग एंड मोहम्मद अली. क्लियर है? समझ में आया है इतना? अच्छा. नाउ इनिशियली French had the upper hand. They had taken the initiative. Therefore, both the French clients were seated on the throne. कौन कौन थे French clients? मुजफ्फर जंग and चंदा साहेब. Was this acceptable to the British East India Company? No. So what did they do? They raised a large army at Madras, gave the command to Robert Clive and told him to attack Arcot. This resulted in a famous battle known as the Siege of Arcot in 1751. क्या हुआ यहां पर? The British recorded a major victory. Chanda Sahib was forced to flee and was later assassinated by his Maratha soldiers. ठीक है? So now at the beginning of this conflict, अंग्रेजों का कोई नामो निशान था साउथ इंडिया में? नहीं. At both Hyderabad and Arcot, the French had been able to install their nominees. But now the British gained a foothold in South India. ठीक है? French suffered a major setback. And punish किसको किया गया इसके लिए? The French Governor General. कौन? Dupleix. He was recalled and tried for corruption. Right? Now this was a major turning point. Since Dupleix was the only capable French contemporary governor in India, French officer in India, after this, French fortunes are never going to recover. ठीक है? Now the tide has started to turn in the favor of the British and it is going to flow in this direction only. Clear? Now we come to the Third Carnatic War. Time period 1756 to 63. It is going to coincide with another global conflict. कौन सा? The 7 Years War. Britain and France are going to fight on multiple theaters, fighting in Europe also, in North America also, in the Caribbean also, and in India also. सब जगह लड़ रहे हैं, तो हिंदुस्तान में भी लड़ लिए. ठीक है? By this point of time, the French control over South India had started to weaken. ठीक है? Then 1757, a major British victory. कहां पर? At Plassey. Plassey में विक्ट्री से अंग्रेजों को क्या हाथ लगा? बंगाल. Is it going to have any impact on the Anglo-French conflict? Yes. First of all, the British will be in a position to eliminate the French from Bengal, and they can then use the entire territory and resources of Bengal to focus upon eliminating the French from the rest of India as well. एक करके जितने भी फ्रेंच इंस्टॉलमेंट्स हैं, जितने भी फ्रेंच सेटलमेंट्स हैं, ऑल ऑफ देम आर गोइंग टू फॉल टू दी ब्रिटिश. जैसे कि चंद्रनगर, बालासोर, यनम, Masulipatam, the entire northern Sarkars is going to slip out of the French grasp. कौन सा बचा हुआ है अभी? केवल पौंडीचेरी बचा हुआ है, राइट? Now British army is advancing from Madras towards Pondicherry. बीच में एक गांव पड़ता है वांडीवासी. Back then it was known as Wandiwash. There a famous battle is going to take place in 1761, right? 1760-61 में. British side is going to be led by Sir Eyre Coote. A decisive British victory is going to happen, and after this even Pondicherry is going to fall. ठीक है? However, since the war in Europe and America has not yet ended, no peace treaty is going to be signed. Simply a ceasefire is going to be declared. Officially, the two sides are going to remain at war for the next 2 years till 1763. And peace treaty कहाँ पे साइन होगा? हिंदुस्तान में या यूरोप में? यूरोप में. कहाँ? Treaty of Paris. Peace of Paris, 1763. Important terms of this treaty with respect to India. Pondicherry, Chandranagar, Mahe, Karikal, Yanam. Earlier, all of them were under the control of French, right? अब during the war, they had been captured by the British. अब क्या होगा? Are the British going to retain them or return them? They will be returned. But before returning, some conditions will have to be fulfilled. क्या conditions? That the French cannot maintain a naval presence in India. They cannot fortify these settlements. These settlements will be governed by an English official, an English resident. Security will be provided by an English contingent, English garrison, right? The trade is going to happen through British intermediaries. So direct trade between Indians and the French was prohibited. Then the French, they would also have to agree to support all the client governments of the British in India. So all the British allies in India, they would also become the French allies. The French cannot join any alliance against any British ally in India. ठीक है? तो अब क्या है? Do the French have any ambitions left or any hope of making a comeback left? No, they have been completely eliminated from India. Is this clear? तो अल्टीमेटली कर्नाटिक वॉर्स में किसकी जीत हुई है? अंग्रेजों की. अब ये बताओ कि क्यों हुई? Why did the British succeed and the French failed? First is the difference in the nature of the companies. The British East India Company किस तरह का कंपनी था? पब्लिक सेक्टर अंडरटेकिंग और प्राइवेट एंटरप्राइज? प्राइवेट एंटरप्राइज. इट वाज अ प्राइवेट जॉइंट स्टॉक कंपनी. तो प्राइवेट एंटरप्राइज ओवर पब्लिक एंटरप्राइज, सम ऑब्वियस एडवांटेजेस क्या होगा? वन इज गोइंग टू बी ऑलवेज मोर प्रॉफिटेबल, मोर एफिशिएंट. कौन सा? प्राइवेट या पब्लिक वाला? प्राइवेट वाला. सेम डिफरेंस एज द जियो अगेंस्ट BSNL, ठीक है। तो ज्यादा प्रॉफिटेबल हमेशा कौन होगा? जियो ही रहेगा। तो हमेशा इनका प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी ज्यादा होगा। इफ दे आर मोर प्रॉफिटेबल देन दे हैव मोर रिसोर्सेज, their soldiers are going to be paid regularly, their morale is going to be higher, the independence of officials ज्यादा कहाँ होगा? प्राइवेट में या पब्लिक में? प्राइवेट में। फ्रेंच ऑफिशियल्स, उनको एक कुर्सी भी खरीदनी होगी तो पहले पेरिस लेटर लिखो, फिर वहां से रिक्विजिशन करवाओ, राइट? So degree of accountability is always going to be much higher when taxpayer money is involved, ठीक है? As a result, decision making ability of the British governors was much greater. They could take initiative, they could be more prompt, ठीक है? So these were the advantages due to the differences in the nature. Second, और क्या reasons होंगे? Battle of Plassey. अच्छा, तो you can say that the British also enjoyed some strategic advantages. किस तरह के strategic advantages? First of all, a superior navy. उस समय अंग्रेजों की एक saying थी, बड़े गर्व से बोलते थे, Britannia rules the seas, Britannia rules the waves. That means that there is no stronger navy than the British Navy. French were never a match for the British naval strength. So इससे फायदा क्या होगा? The French troops could be isolated, they could be blockaded, they could be starved of essential supplies. British troops will always remain well provided. Logistics would be much better. Naval engagements में भी the British are always going to have a upper hand. ठीक है? Then secondly, what was the strongest French port in India? पौंडीचेरी, ठीक है। और सामने अंग्रेजों के पास क्या क्या था? हुगली, मद्रास, कैलकाटा, राइट? तो कैलकाटा, हुगली बोल रहा हूँ, बॉम्बे, मद्रास एंड हुगली, कैलकाटा, तो बंगाल का पूरा प्रोविंस इनके पास था। थर्डली, ब्रिटिश विक्ट्री ओवर प्लासी, had given them the entire resources of Bengal, which could be directed towards defeating the French. And lastly, better officers किसके पास थे? The British. Why do you think that British could rely upon the services of better officers? No, they were not paid very highly. In fact, the French officers were paid very highly. देखो, the French society was not egalitarian. It was feudal in nature. ठीक है? So all the higher positions would be the exclusive province of a selected few families. ठीक है? Because the commission as an officer of the French East India Company was highly sought after. तो यहाँ पे कौन आएगा? कॉमन आदमी आएगा या फिर नोबेल आएगा? नोबेल आएगा हमेशा. टैलेंट पूल इज गोइंग टू बी वेरी लिमिटेड. एंड अंग्रेजों में क्या था? Although feudalism was there, but it had been weakened significantly. Britain had emerged as a constitutional monarchy and a large number of rights had been transferred to the common British people. So British society was more egalitarian in nature. ठीक है? As a result, merit rather than birth or the social status of the official used to dictate his position within the company. So it was merit based. तो यहाँ पर किसी का भाई, भतीजा, चाचा, ताऊ वो बन के आएगा, यहाँ पे the best person suited for the job उसको यहाँ पे भेजेंगे. So talent pool was much larger. Clear? Achha. Any other factors that you can think of for the French defeat? डुप्ले के जाने के बाद none of the French governors showed that kind of imagination or initiative. ठीक है? So probably you can say short-sightedness of the French establishment in Paris was also to blame. ठीक है? अच्छा. Anything else? नहीं? So these are the factors. So Anglo-French wars we have covered. एक बचा हुआ है कौन सा? Anglo-Bengal wars. इसको हम कल cover करेंगे. Any doubts? नहीं? Online students, please explain again Orientalism, utilitarianism, and liberalism. So these are three different cultural these things. Cultural policies followed by the colonial administrators towards India. Orientalism पहले phase में mercantile phase में follow किया. According to Orientalism, Indian civilization, British civilization is different, but one is not superior to the other. So India में बहुत ज़्यादा वो changes नहीं करना चाहते थे क्योंकि उसको करने के लिए खर्चा करना पड़ता. That is why Orientalism को promote किया. Utilitarianism, by this point of time, the economic priorities had shifted. The British wanted to establish a large market in India. How could that be done? By encouraging large scale changes in the Indian society. So Indians को बोल दिया that your civilization is inferior to the British civilization. In fact, you are not civilized at all. You are barbaric. And कैसे आप advance करोगे आगे? So the British will have to guide you. British are in India to civilize you. तो ये होता है यूटिलिटेरियनिज्म और लिबरलिज्म का बेसिक स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट. डिफरेंस होता है इन द एंड पॉइंट. नाउ ऑन द वन हैंड यूटिलिटेरियनिज्म में एंड पॉइंट है दैट अल्टीमेटली द इंडियंस आर गोइंग टू बी सिविलाइज्ड इनफ टू गवर्न देमसेल्व्स. तो एंड रिजल्ट इज गोइंग टू बी सेल्फ रूल. लिबरलिज्म में क्या बोलेंगे? दैट इंडियंस विल ऑलवेज नीड द गाइडिंग हैंड of the colonial administrators to stay civilized. अगर अपने हाल पे छोड़ दिया they are going to go back to their old ways. दोबारा से uncivilized हो जाएंगे. ठीक है? So this is the idea. समझ में आया है मितेश? Okay. All right then. Any other doubts? नहीं? चलिए. Thank you then. See you tomorrow.